to Battle Hosts. Be a better gamer, build a better community.
Welcome to Battle Hosts, a podcast dedicated to helping you become a better 40K gamer and to build a better community of players. I'm your host, Mark, and with me tonight is Colin.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
In this episode, we're going to talk about competitive versus casual players in 40K. How they view the hobby and how they like to play the game, which tends to be very different from each other, and usually what happens when their expectations clash during a game. That's when you get the classic feel-bad moments.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
In our experience, it's always been because you have two players that want two different games and they're playing. And they're literally playing two different games. So
Yes.
We've seen it locally. We see it all the time. You see it even at events. But we'll talk a little bit about like what are they trying to get out of the hobby. And some of you listeners might recognize yourself in one of these, three different types of players typically, but also just recognizing when somebody else does not share that, and then knowing when the game maybe is the game state isn't a problem. There's a problem during the game.
Yeah.
And why that happens.
Yeah, and this isn't going to include like a value judgment
No.
on which of the three is most superior.
Sure.
Right? Because it really is a case of like, this hobby is what you make of it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And what you're looking for it. So there's going to be one of these three that is likely best for you or best for your interactions with your friends or your local community. But it's not a case. I just want to establish that right now, because as soon as you say casual versus competitive, I think what comes to mind for some people is like Facebook threads.
Yeah.
Of this is the problem with the game, or you're the problem, or whatever it may be. That's not what we're getting into.
Yeah, we're not going to get personal, but we're definitely going to discuss what they want to get out of it.
Yeah.
There's no wrong way to play this game.
No.
There's no wrong way to play this game.
GW
Just
doesn't want a wrong way. They want everyone to play everything.
Yeah, I mean, however you want to play it, have fun.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to be talking about is just what happens when your way to play the game isn't the same as who you're playing.
Yes. And
sure.
and in these three, what if you are choosing this form of playing, what should you be focusing on? What are some good do's? What are some good don'ts? Those kind of things.
For sure. We're also going to talk about starting and ending a project. And so, Colin, you can
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the latest project, from kind of your conception of it to what you're going now and what your plans are.
Yeah.
But also we can talk about projects that we have bounced back and forth and abandoned. We've talked to lots of different projects.
Yeah.
For every project that makes it on the table, there's probably like 10 they're discarded.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a great idea, and then somehow it doesn't work.
Right.
But also, like, when is an army done? Like, when are you finished with something? Technically, you're
I'll
not.
let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can finish armies. What?
I know, exactly. Or maybe a model. Like, when do you call it done?
Yeah.
But also, and when to bail, like when to call
Yeah.
it a day, when to say no, we're done, and sell it off and move on to something else. Because it's okay to cut your losses. For sure.
Yeah.
You don't have to force yourself to paint something if you just don't want to.
Yep.
All right, but before we jump into it, let's hear a word from our main sponsor, TraderA.com. If you're like most Warhammer players, you own a ton of models. At one time, you had big plans for these models, but now they just kind of sit, gathering dust, unused and unloved. It's time to clean out your closet of shame. Visit TraderA.com and get cash for your used models. TraderA is run by Captain A, someone who's been in the community a long time and has done a lot to grow the hobby. He's also a personal friend of the show. Unopened boxes, models on a sprue, half-built models, primed, painted, even bits have value. The process is simple. Send him a list of what you have, he'll send you a quote, you pack it up, send in your stuff, and he'll get you cash. You can shop around, but you're going to find that TraderA gives you 40% more than the other guys. You want it quick, you want to get rid of it, visit TraderA.com. Get cash to buy the stuff that you really want. TraderA.com. Sell your models and get your cash quick and easy. Okay, on to our main topic. So 40K players play the game for a lot of different reasons. Some of them want to play competitive. Some of them want to just tell a story. Some of them just want to hang out with friends and roll dice, the classic beer and pretzels. If some people want to do all three, there are rare people that can kind of go. I like to think the three of us are flexible enough that we can play in multiple different ways. I think that we're not so competitive that that's all we play. We're not so casual that we don't want a little bit of competitive. I feel like we could bounce.
I think competitive and narrative is kind of the bridge. I don't know if
Agreed.
I can go full casual.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's hard. We'll talk a little bit about that too. Yeah, for sure. To go full casual it's tricky, especially during the game. Yeah. But
just the mechanics of the game.
Yes.
It gets tricky.
Yes.
It does.
I've done it some, though, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, you just have to change the way you think about the game.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure.
Absolutely.
The problem, though, comes when players with different expectations play each other. And that's kind of the feel bad experience. So let's talk a little bit about competitive versus casual players from 40K. So 40K, it's unique, right? It's one of those unique games in that it can be narrative or casual or competitive. And we're using these as three big categories. That doesn't necessarily mean that, people have a little bit of everything, but I feel like those are the three big ones. And that's what GW has recognized. You have open play, you have match play, and then you have Crusade, right? They have three sections or game systems with this new edition that cater to each audience. There's a lot of space to be either extreme, and it has its roots in role-playing games. That's really where it came from. And it's changed to kind of favor one over the other because 5th edition, I think, was widely regarded as one of the best competitive, quote unquote,
Yes.
balanced or tightest game systems.
Yeah.
Take the codexes out of it, right? Take Grey Knights out of it. But
But
the
there
actual
were some
system,
issues later.
yes. But the system was built to be such a way that you could play match play on the tabletop.
And from my experience, 5th is when events and tournaments really started to move out of the realm of there's something local, they're regional, they're one day. I feel like that's when in 5th you start seeing the promulgation of more larger events that are more advertised, that are more of a destination thing.
Yeah.
Multiple days.
Yep.
I'm not that those didn't exist before that, but 5th really furthered that idea in the community.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't that the same? I mean, it also dovetailed with just the rise of the internet and
Yeah.
forums and
absolutely.
chat rooms and just the information reaching people easier as well.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. For sure. So the latest edition, I think with 8th was when they, so 6th and 7th, they tried to become a little more narrative. It was like this game with, look out, sir. They put little story elements onto it. And that's why a lot of players from 5th edition just was like, nope, peace out. Like, in fact, Sean, you failed on 6th and 7th.
Yeah, 6th I didn't really enjoy that much, and I already had a lot of other pain points, and so that was enough for me to take a step back.
Yeah.
I got back into the game in 6th,
Yeah.
which
I
had a
myself
blast.
got into the game in 6th.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I like
ships
6th.
passing in the night.
Yes.
You were joining, I was leaving.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't think it was until 8th edition when they finally formally, quote unquote, recognized the different styles. And I think that's kind of where we're at now. And I think it's great that they're doing that. They basically want anyone to play 40K. They don't want to have they want no matter what your expectations are, they want to provide that with some rules and to sell you some models and some books to make you let you enjoy the game the way you want to play it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no wrong or right way to play the game.
No.
It's just different ways.
And I think one thing that's really important to mention at the outset too is like we're 30s, early 40s. Like Games Workshop wants us to play, and we've been playing this game for a decade or more.
Yep.
They want us to play. They also want 12-year-olds to play this game.
Absolutely.
So they have to write a rule set that works for guys that play this game competitively and have for a decade, but also 12-year-olds.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and 12-year-olds want a different thing out of the game than we do.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
that's a tough bridge. I feel like people get hyper focused on kind of one purpose. Everybody thinks GW's marketing to them.
Yeah.
GW's marketing to 12-year-old boys and girls and 70-year-old historical wargamers who like the models. Like they're trying to catch everybody.
Yep.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
Sure. Absolutely.
But especially in 9th edition, I feel like, and it started really a concerted effort in 8th, and then also with 9th, those 12-year-olds are like where they are putting a lot of their marketing energy with the easy to build kits. And it's an important thing to highlight because they're not going to swing towards the 40-year-olds at the expense of the 12-year-olds.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a good point. When something comes out that doesn't strike you, when something is released, whether it's a website article or a model or a line or whatever, a piece of media property,
Right.
if it doesn't strike you like, oh, that's not very interesting, or hey, they're doing this, it's not like the company is trying to. They're basically. They're just not speaking to you personally.
Right.
And you just got to recognize, well, this isn't for me, but it's clearly for somebody else.
Yeah.
So, and think a little bit about like what are they going for with that? I think Crusade is definitely the first time they've really engaged the narrative play because they put a lot of time into Crusade. Like the latest books, there's a ton of it. Like every section, there is a Crusade section. Now, competitive players are like, yeah, Crusade, whatever. But for people to play it, it's a big deal. So,
and it's awesome.
It is.
Yeah.
It is
It's
really
awesome. The Crusade content is where you get that kind of bringing Black Library onto the table is in the Crusade content, in my opinion.
It has a heavy RPG element too, because you're
lot.
creating and
Oh, it
developing. It's like experience points and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and they're taking systems that existed in pieces. You know, like they'd publish a book or the old Kill Team system. You know, so they took some of these older systems that had some of the building blocks, and then what I love about it is they just really built a functioning, great system out of it that is you know, all inclusive for here's what you want to do, right? Because they had Planet Strike. You know, and that was designed around, we're going to try to build this narrative of you are attacking a planet, we want to support campaigns, you know, and then, like I said, the old Kill Team progression rules, those existed. But with Crusade, it is a toolbox that you can do so much with. I mean, it really is impressive what they were able to design. And it really just feels like all of this other work coming to fruition and finally getting to see like the finished product of it, especially with Ninth Ed codexes.
I think, and this is not this is talking a little bit about Games Workshop and as far as how they can. I would actually like to see more stuff in Crusade. I would like to see more of the stuff that's in matched play pushed to Crusade, especially some of the stuff that's a little more, because you can just pile the rules in a Crusade because it's all about picking the things and being very custom with your army. Less rules in matched play makes for, to me, a little more of a balanced game. I could see a day where, you know, a match play has less of the warlord traits, the relics, the even some of the strats, and pushing those into more of that Crusade role playing element and making the game a little bit tighter. But well, anyway, there's
an interesting idea.
There's so much room in Crusade to put stuff. Yeah, that's cool. That makes your army flavorful. That I don't know. There's a huge design space. I think they're just scratching the surface right now.
Absolutely.
Now, narrative players. Let's talk about narrative players. Now, Colin, you came from a area where there was a lot of, like, they touted themselves as narrative players. Yeah. And narrative players, I guess, describe to me what is a narrative player?
So the narrative play, I think stems from just enjoying what you're collecting and painting first. Yeah. And the game is second. Yeah. And the game is the opportunity to play with your army, but you collect armies because you like the army, and you collect units because you like that unit. You want to build and paint that unit. I hung out with, Carl and Brian and a lot of Austin and a lot of those guys in the Bay Area. And it was always, we were always like, when we talked about the game, we talked about building and painting. We talked about what units were cool. Yeah. And we weren't talking about
the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, or it would be like, oh man, it's cool that this guy turns into a spawn if you smite him on a 6 or whatever. Like, that's cool. But it wasn't combos. Yeah. Yeah. And that, it's just a different way to look at the space. Yeah. So when I started collecting demons, I was like, well, I'm going to do Tzeentch demons, just mono Tzeentch demons. Yeah. And so I bought a bunch of Tzeentch demons and I built them and I painted them and like flaming chariots and, like these units that weren't great. And then I moved up here and you were like, oh, if you got Ahriman and took a couple demon princes and moved them over to this detachment, it's like a whole new world to get ready for Boise Cup. So, which was cool, so I got to paint Ahriman and it fit in the theme, but it was also just a better list. Yeah. But
that wasn't your first, when you first said, I'm going to do Tzeentch demons, a list, how it played wasn't as important as collecting the models that fit kind of what that army should look like and feel like.
100%. Yeah. And it was just, I'm going to play, I'm going to play my friend's Grey Knights or whatever because I have demons or, there wasn't really a consideration of the rules when you went into like building your list. I mean, I did take, like, I would still take the Changeling because -1 to hit's really helpful. Sure. But
he's also a super cool Tzeentch unit. Right?
But he's cool. Like the Tzeentch, non-demon prince character. Yeah. So it wasn't until later when, you're deep striking flamers off of the Herald and stuff
Sure.
like that you start to get into, oh, well, then if I deep strike, I'm going to use a psychic power, then
Yeah.
and then charge a bit.
Yeah.
And then it starts to get a little bit more into a competitive space.
Yeah.
Even before the game starts, when you're starting to just play an army, it starts with, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab that. Oh, I want to paint that. I'll just grab that.
Yeah, it's like narrative players. Their armies fit the lore, or the lore they have in their head, or their vision for it, and that true narrative gamers don't really care about who wins. It's more got that experience of telling a story or those cool moments because it's like, oh, this cool moment happened in the game, and the game is just there to facilitate that, really. Yeah. And so when you're planning out an army. As a competitive player, you're in Battlescribe crunching back and forth, doing this, tweaking stuff.
Right.
Narrative players, I'm sure they're just like looking at the Games Workshop site or looking at different painted ideas or going through Instagram and going, oh, that's a really cool looking thing. So,
or like, hey, I want to build, Iskander Khan's warband from the Black Legion series. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even a legal unit.
Yeah.
And they're just like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to play them as Terminators. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Do that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. And the rules will fit. I'll make the rules fit. But
Yeah.
in general, I want the visual to be there. Yeah.
Like, my friend Eric's doing a Thousand Suns thing. And so he's like, well, what if you use but he wants to make, Scarab Occult without having to paint Scarab Occult. So I'm like, well, what if you used like some Mechanicum models from 30K that were like robed and like,
oh yeah, okay.
Just do something just totally out of left field that, probably wouldn't fly at an event. People would be like, yeah, that doesn't look like what it's supposed to, but he can wrap it up in his army theme.
Sure.
And it would fit 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, flip that with competitive players.
Yeah.
Competitive players, if a narrative player isn't concerned about who wins, a competitive player, let's see, they want to win, right? That's that's their goal.
Yes.
That's they may not want to win in a specific game, but ultimately they want to get better at the game.
Yeah.
Right.
There's that element of I want to be a better player. I want to use my army better. I want to understand the game better. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's where a lot of the fulfilling moments are happening. Of like getting done with a game, win or lose, and you walk away from it and you go, that sequence of plays that I just made right there, I don't think I would have known how or would have been able to execute that 6 months ago. Right. And the fact that I just did that feels really good.
Yeah.
Like, man, I just unlocked a new tool for myself. Or that kind of a feeling.
Yeah.
And of course, winning is a big part of that. If you make a great play and you lose the game by 2, you still take the great play away. But then you also kind of have this thing of, but I was so close.
All the mistakes I made, or I could have done this better.
Right. And I could list games right now from 5 years ago, 2 years ago, a few months ago.
Yeah.
With that feeling, but at the same time, you're taking away a great play. You're taking away this, I was so close, or I got there. Yeah. And so winning is part of it, but it's not. A lot of people feel like competitive play is just, did you win? Yes, no. You're going to have a bad time, good time.
Yep.
There is really fulfilling, rewarding things in that, like being able to track your self-improvement like that.
But beating up on somebody who doesn't know how to win the game, if you're an actual competitive player, not somebody who... We'll go.
If you're a big fish in a small pond, you're not becoming a better player.
No, and let's make the case that there are bad apples among all of these groups.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
We'll touch on them, but we're not going to dwell on them, right?
Going back to what Sean was talking about, winning and losing. Like when I play Sean on Thursday night, I'm not overly concerned with winning or losing. I'm trying to learn my list. I'm trying to learn his list and what it does. Because I'm worried about winning or losing 3 weeks from now when we have an event.
Exactly.
And events are the test.
Beat who I'm playing in the event, period.
Yes.
That's where I want to win.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if I lose, I'm doing what Sean's doing, where I'm like, or like, I don't know, for whatever reason, the events we've been to this year, I either score 90 points or get dunked on with 90 points. Like I haven't had that many close games, but...
Sure.
But so the winning isn't necessarily even the point.
Yeah.
If I'm not in an event, and it's list fluency, it's trying new things, and so
the thing about a competitive player, though, the models are not as important as the rules the models have. Now, I know that there are a lot of us, especially the three of us, there are some things we may or may not take because we just don't like the models, right? Even though it may be the quote unquote optimal choice.
Yeah.
But in general, it's not so much what the model looks like, it's the rules the models have, which is kind of the flip side or opposite of what a narrative player might look for.
Yes.
So an extreme competitive player really, and this is rare. Most players, a lot of players have a certain fondness for certain factions, or there's things they won't do. But extreme competitive players think in terms of rules and not models. So they would be perfectly happy with just little cardboard standees for every single thing and just pushing bases around,
or
right?
3D printed tokens.
Right, or just whatever, like just
absolutely.
stuff, right? Just a physical representation, but it doesn't even have to look good. As long as it has maybe a different color, they're looking at how do I play this game,
Right.
and I don't need to have even painted anything.
How do I math you to death?
Yeah, that's it. Or win with rules, right?
Right.
You know?
As long as the game pieces are functional,
Yeah.
that's enough. Right. And that is the extreme end of the spectrum, because this really is a spectrum.
Yes.
Right? Like you are going to land somewhere
Absolutely.
And
on this spectrum.
I mean, that's like 1%, less than 1% of competitive players.
Yeah.
I think are that extreme where
Most,
they just,
most have a weakness. They won't go that.
0.5%.
Agreed.
I mean, the overwhelming majority of competitive players just, they like their army.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Or they're multiple armies.
Or multiple armies. Yeah.
But
And if that wasn't the case, you wouldn't see the number of gorgeous armies you do at competitive events.
Sure. There's
right?
just there's such a high cost of entry.
There is.
There's such a high, you have to like your army
yeah.
Yeah.
to play this game.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah.
Or you just hate money, one of the two.
Yeah. But, in general, well, I think most of us probably hate, clearly. Or we love models more than the money.
Yes.
If you have any money that you're hating a lot, you can send it to me. I will dispose of it for you.
You
Yes.
can find the Battle Host on Patreon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure.
Custom pledge.
But some of them are more extreme than others, like you said. But in general, the goal is to win.
Yeah.
But I think you mentioned it, to win at an event, because an event is the competitive sort of tournament. It's like I won't call them an athlete, but athletes have, a marathon runner has a marathon they're training for.
Right.
Yeah.
That's sort of what a competitive player is always doing, thinking
Practice.
they're practicing for the next time they play
Yes.
when it quote unquote
Right.
counts.
Right.
Yes.
An RTT, GT, a major, LVO, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're practicing for when it counts, when their scores matter.
Yeah. And that practice might look a lot different from playing through a full game. Mm-hmm. When
Yes.
I practiced with Mike, when we were really prepping for LVO, we'd play a turn, or I'd do a movement phase, and I'd stop. I'd be done with the movement phase, and he'd go during the scrim, "Why'd you move that unit like that?" He would never do that during a competitive.
No,
event,
no.
Right? But
no.
but then we'd talk through it, and then we'd play 2 turns, and we go, okay, you want to re-rack this, set it back up. Here's
Sure.
the one big mistake. Let's get a different practice. Or like on Thursday, I played against Ben, and I'm still trying to figure out what exactly I can and cannot do with Black Knights. And I went for a high risk, high reward. The one model that was the closest to the unit that I was going to charge and tie up killed itself with overcharging.
Plasma overcharge,
Yeah,
yeah.
I had reroll 1, still died. And I went, crap. Gamble didn't work out. Game was like, we talked it out after turn 1.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
like, okay, so what are you going to do? What am I going to do? What's the points probably going to look like? What is my
Yeah.
focus from here on? And there was no sting there for me to go like, the sting that I had was I told Ben, I was like, I'm sorry for not giving you a better game.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm sorry
Yeah.
that this game could be called so early, but the discussion of, here's the choices that you made, Ben, in your army construction, because that's really what he was really checking.
Yeah.
Was,
Yeah.
are these good picks? That was valuable for him. For me, it was valuable to do that high risk, high reward. Here's what I can and can't get away with. So it ended up being very productive, even though for both of us, the game was over. From agreeing that we were going to play to calling the game was less than an hour.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
for sure. But really, what you're looking at when competitive players play, they're not necessarily. It's practice. It's always about practice, about getting better, to know your list more, to get into different situations where you're like, okay, how do I get out of this, and how do I grind points, and that when they play competitively, not all the time, because we can all are capable of playing just for funsies.
Yeah, right.
We'll
Absolutely.
just take fun
Right.
things.
Yeah, and I think it depends. I mean, of course, there's endless caveats to all of this, but
Of
like
course.
we're all teammates too.
Yes.
So like when we play each other, it's specifically we know it's practice, and yet I can still be a salty bitch when we play.
We all can. It's okay.
It but like if I'm playing another competitive player who maybe I don't know that well, it's going to be more of a tournament atmosphere than if I'm playing a friend or I'm playing a teammate.
Yeah, that's fair.
And if somebody's like, oh, hey, I want a competitive game, and I'm maybe never played them before, I'm going to go more into a tournament mode than a practice mode.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. With competitive players, there's a tournament mode and then there's a practice mode. And whether you shift into one of those depends on the person you're familiar. If you're familiar with them,
Right.
and you say, "Hey, I want a practice game," and they know what you're talking about,
Yes.
then they go into that.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I will typically draw a line between a practice game where I am practicing event play, where it's like I'm not going to let you give
No
me
takebacks.
I'm not going to, not that I'm not going to give them, I don't want them from you.
Yes.
If I make a mistake, make it painful because that's how I learn. Sometimes you got to touch the hot stove. So if I make a mistake and it fucks me and you go, hey, let's, like you can take that back. Unless it's going to be like, you're not going to enjoy the game because my mistake just ruined the game at turn one, right? And then there's scrims. And for me, a scrim is like, we're going to talk it out.
Yeah.
If you decide like, hey, why don't you do this? Because that's going to be a more interesting situation for us to continue to play. I'll be like, hey, let's do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think the issue becomes when a competitive player only plays in tournament mode.
Yes, absolutely.
If your vision of competitive play is just tournament mode, there's more of an opportunity to run into somebody that is not in tournament mode.
Absolutely.
And they're just going to be like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's not good for them and it's not good for you either.
Yeah.
Because you are missing out on a different form of practice.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And that's that. So everything we just talked about, competitive players, I imagine your crew, your old crew, the narrative will be like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
What are they?
Yeah, I'm like the outcast now because I've gone over to the dark side of, and it would be interesting. I haven't actually gone because of COVID. I was planning on going back last year, but I haven't actually gone back and had a game day with them. But if I were, I would have to like think through it, and I would take a completely different list than what I play on.
Absolutely. And you would probably not do a lot of the thing. You wouldn't probably use a stratagem in certain moments, or you go, well, all right, I could do this and this, and I'd beat the game. But what is it? Is it helping? No, let's keep it going here.
Right.
And then
like I'm gonna charge over here because it would be cool.
It'd be cool.
It's gonna be very interesting to watch this unit and that unit fight.
Yeah, for sure.
Instead of using my death company to go kill your 5 models that are standing on an objective and deny you primary points, I'm going to send my death company into the teeth of your close combat unit. I'm gonna charge. Who comes out blood soaked the most.
I'm going to charge with 3 guys. I'm going to fight with not my equipped weapon. I'm just going to fight with my melee base strength weapon so that I don't kill you and I wrap you.
Yes.
Because I know you don't have the CP to break out.
Yeah.
And then like
and they're going to be like, what is all this? What are you talking about?
Go back to Idaho.
Why were you
Colin, what are you trying to prove?
Go back to Idaho.
Let's talk about casual players.
Yes.
Because there's kind of the third group. And casual players, it's a mix, right? Because casual is kind of more of a messy middle. And casual is kind of in the eye of the person, of the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Casual players may want to win. And then I think the problem is when you want to play casually, but you also have a desire to win. That's when it's a tricky thing for you as a player. But ultimately, they want to have a fun experience.
Yeah.
And the fun is a subjective thing. And so they kind of take what they like or what they have painted. They may take themed lists because they're cool. They may play the same list for years and years and years, and that's what they play.
That's what they like.
If they go to an event, they're more likely to be drinking during the event and having a quote unquote, just a good time and just hanging out. And whether they win, sometimes they care they win, sometimes they don't. But casual players are much more. It's a very subjective experience because a casual player can be tricky. So if somebody's like, I just want to play a casual game. If somebody tells me that and I don't know them, I don't know what they mean. So I'll have to tease it out.
Yeah.
Like, what are you taking? What are some things you want to do? And so, because casual to some players may mean a competitive list, there is the casual competitive, right?
Yeah.
Where you play competitively, but you play kind of more in that like fun, talking, casual atmosphere where you give take backs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then there's just a pure casual, like I want to play my guard list that I've been playing for the last decade, that has all the stuff. And I don't want to play a list that is so strong that it's just going to wipe me off the table because that's not fun for me.
The first one's the hardest one because they don't want to play a list that's going to wipe them off the table either.
Yeah.
But they want to play their themed list somewhat competitively and win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or
but
at least
they don't
have
want
a
to play
chance
a
to win.
competitive list
Yeah.
and win.
So it's tricky. It's
because
a tricky
the theme
thing.
list to just get typically against a competitive player, the theme list will just get rocked by a tournament list.
Or when they're playing, they're not playing to a mission. They're kind of playing more maybe a little old school. So, you bust out the match play book and like secondaries. What I don't even know what this means.
It's the hardest. It's the hardest game to navigate, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
The more experience you have, the harder it is.
Yeah.
Because now new players really have, I think everyone has kind of a bent toward one of these, and they will kind of naturally gravitate. But oftentimes it's kind of who you're playing is where you sort of grow up in that.
Right.
And when I first started, a bunch of casual players kind of took me under the wing and taught me how to play. And I remember this was in 6th edition. I was running Eldar because I loved Eldar, and I remember going, "Hey guys, do you think it's too cheesy to add in a second Wave Serpent to my army?" Now, this was when Wave Serpents were good. The top list had 6 of them. So I was asking, hey, would it be too cheesy to add a second Wave Serpent? And they're like, no, just play your army. That's cool. It's cool. But I always had to kind of test to see, if the stuff I'm taking, does it meet this vaguely defined idea of not cheesy, more of a themed list. That's not going to be so strong that it just dominates.
Yes.
Because we all know this game, there's no, the balance is way out of whack. I mean, you can take things.
It could skew real quick.
The game can skew.
Yeah.
So the balance is out of whack if you randomly picked units out of each book, there would not be a balanced game, really. But you can take different units from different armies and take a much stronger or weaker power level.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
I think if you brought like a third Wave Serpent, you would probably start getting in trouble.
Yes. The second one was fine. I think if I had taken a third, it may have been a little tricky.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that
And
was-
now every time you think about Eldar, you're like, how many Wave Serpents do I need?
Well, yeah. Well, I have 6 now. So what I eventually happened was, I was part of this casual crew, and it was really fun because it's a laid back experience. Because the thing is, you show up and you're just having fun, and who wins, whatever, you're there. We get coffee. We get
It's
coffee in the
really fun.
morning. We'd
Yeah.
play each other. I mean, we'd whatever. Hey, I painted this new thing. Hey, let's try a fire prism. Okay. And then it was just fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, it was over with. But then once you start to get better at the game and you start to look at a list and go, this thing is better than that. Why don't I take this thing? Once you start to have those questions in your mind, you tend to gravitate to more of a competitive side. And I think that's kind of what happened with me was I sort of fell in with a different crowd who played competitively. And that's when
From
I
the
started
other side of the tracks.
From the other side of
Yeah.
the tracks. And that's, I think, when I started to kind of gravitate toward that a little more. So I think casual play is super fun. I think that if we play casual play, and I can do it, first is it's not about getting better at the game. You have to turn that off. It's not about practice because you're not going to get any practice in. You're basically there just to have a good time. And sometimes you're there just to help newer players get their feet wet.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of casual players are usually new that are sort of learning the game a little bit.
And I will say I don't think it's a natural progression. It was for us to go from casual to competitive.
Sure.
I think a lot of people do that progression, but I don't think for everybody they get to that point where they're looking at the list and they're saying, oh, this one's better than this one. I think I should actually take that. Because as you said, their priorities are more, I like this unit better than that for whatever reason it may be. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
When I really got into 40K, my roommate and I were both 40K nuts, and I worked at All About Games, one of the local stores. And so, half my paycheck went back to the store.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, as it happens.
As it happens. Right? And we just live, breathe, eat 40K. And we played in tournaments, but outside of the tournaments, we were like designing forces to like face off against each other and making these ideas. And we'd show up at the store with just a bunch of models, and we'd like set up a fortress assault. And and the whole idea is like, how long can the Dark Angels hold on to the fortress while the waves of, and from that play, on that one game, we had a biker sergeant and a Raptors sergeant kill each other with a power fist and a thunder hammer, right? And they kill, or 2 power fists. They killed each other at the same time. And then we made a rivalry with those two models.
Sure.
And so anytime they're both on the table, they're going to try to fight each other.
Yeah,
And then he
yeah.
converted up a Chaos Lord with a jump pack, and I converted up a biker captain.
Yeah.
And okay, now they've been promoted. And so
That's the ultimate in casual play.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah,
it's also, it has a narrative bent to
Sounds
it. too,
awesome.
Right? Yeah.
It was
super awesome.
And that captain is now the one that I posted that I'm like, hey, this is going to be my new Ravenwing champion.
Yeah.
I built it because of that, and
Yeah.
I've had him ever since. Right?
I have to admit,
It's a fun way to play.
sometimes I want to. It's not about going back.
Just Men in Black and just zoop,
Yeah.
lose all the tournament knowledge. Just start over.
Just there is moments. There
Yeah,
are moments
it's a great
because
way to
it's
play,
hard.
man.
It's hard to shut it off.
I miss playing like Necromunda with styrofoam terrain and stuff. You know, like just that pure. But that's I think what the draw. Side note, I think that's what the draw. Like we always talk about. Oh, let's play AOS or let's play Necromunda. Let's play Titanicus.
A new
because
system because you don't know.
we don't have that.
Yeah. You don't have
Yeah.
that knowledge.
Yep.
Now, Games Workshop again tries to cater to all of them, and you think about like what they've tried to do to make the game more of a competitive game. So they've done things like to try to make armies look like what they should. So Games Workshop has tried to make the armies look like what they quote unquote should. So there's no more allies. You don't soup detachments anymore. There are some bonuses for single chapters. So even among match play, they're trying to at least make the armies feel more like they quote unquote should from the lore.
Yeah.
That there's no longer a Riptide formation next to a bunch of Eldar. This is Matt's LVO list from like 7th edition with the Sisters of Silence Rhino. I mean that was a monstrosity that the rules allowed for.
Well,
But they don't have them anymore. They really want the armies to feel like the armies they are, even in matched play.
yeah. Even in 8th edition, they had the Blood Angel Smash Captain with the Knight Castellan and the Imperial Guard. And they had I had Magnus and Morty and Bloodthirsters.
Yeah.
And like there were these things that were on the table that you just
It's been a slow progression to remove that. Yeah.
Right. And you can still do it. It's
Yeah.
just from a competitive standpoint, it's better not to.
Yeah,
and
because
I think that's
because
the
the
right way to do
rules,
it.
Yes.
the rules are incentivizing you
Yes.
not to. Yeah.
Absolutely.
One of the things about competitive play, though, is that there are some that say 40K is not a competitive game. Now, I disagree. On its base level, you score points and somebody wins. And usually the more skilled player who takes the more optimized list will win. So to me, therefore, it is competitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of strikes against it because you think about it. So 40K, there's a lot of stuff in there that is ambiguous. There's a lot of stuff that's not precise. And if you look at the ITC has published a code of conduct, which is like 20 freaking pages, that's meant to empower judges. And it talks about the things that players need to do in order to provide a competitive experience, which a casual player isn't going to know how to do any of this stuff. The first one is playing by intent. What does play by intent mean? Well, that's a casual player's like, what are you talking about play by now? But as competitive players, we know there's certain etiquette things we have to do to make the game as fair as possible that are not in the rule book.
Yep.
It's more like this. They're not unwritten because they're now in a code of conduct that used to be unwritten, but there are these things we have to do to make this game as precise as possible to provide as competitive and fair an experience. Because right now, I mean, the game uses tape measures. Tape measures are ambiguous, right? You measure something, you're never going to be super precise with it. We always move models, we try to be precise with it.
Yes.
The more casual players or the more players who are less precise are a little more sloppy, and they're fine. That's fine. But a competitive player, you need to be as precise as possible.
That quarter of
You
an
should
inch
be.
likely will matter somewhere.
You should be. And if you're
There
not,
are plenty of competitive players that
aren't.
are
that
sloppy.
aren't,
Yeah.
and they'll get side eyes as it.
Yes.
They will get complaints about it. But in general,
Say something to their face.
or you'll
Yeah.
just let them know, hey,
Hey,
did you
hey.
really move 8 inches? Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
There's line of sight issues, right?
Yes.
So it's always a problem with line of sight. It's like, no, I don't have it. No, I do have it. There's the line of sight issues is always a problem when two players don't agree that this model can see that model.
Yeah.
So that's always can be a problem, and that's why there's judges. So the rules are complex, and it's easy to forget things. I've never had a game where I have played all the rules correctly And usually when I make a mistake, it's usually against me. So
Yeah.
I'm incentivized to remember them. There's so many though. It is impossible to know what everyone does. So like, I don't really know all the stuff that your two armies play, and I've played them a couple. Actually, I probably know what your army does because I've played knights before.
my army's pretty simple at this point.
Yeah, that's true. But Dark Angels, I'm like,
I
okay,
have some
all right.
tricks that you're not aware of, likely,
right?
yeah.
Competitive players will take a lot of time to learn what other armies do, but a lot of times there's a certain level of trust. You have to trust that your component is playing it correctly.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can ask them questions and they're supposed to provide proof, but there's a level of trust there that you have to have. So the game itself is just really ambiguous with tape measures, with dice, with line of sight, it's not like chess. It's not like a board game.
No.
It doesn't have the precision of those games.
Or even just a tabletop game with a hex system.
A BattleTech game.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a level of fuzziness that we have to have a code of conduct to say, here's how you need to play in order to be less fuzzy.
Yeah.
So
and really what it boils down to for me, because I was thinking about this, and it feels to me like there is a social contract for each one of these styles of play. Where if you are playing in that style, the expectation is that you're going to uphold the social contract. And in competitive, winning is, like especially at events, winning is very important. But I would say that the highest priority of that social contract between competitive players, when you enter an event that has a code of conduct, that has judges, is this game will be played by the rules precisely to the best of our ability.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then underneath that is we are playing to win.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because you have to have the first for the second to carry weight. Because when you get into competitive discussions about events, if that first one falls apart, if there is imprecise play, if there are mistakes that go unnoticed or uncorrected, or you know, somebody does notice a mistake and doesn't bring it up because it benefits them, that's when the second priority starts to fall apart.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
that's fair.
Okay, did you actually legitimately win? That's when discussions of what is cheating, what is a misplay, right? That's so that first priority is we're going to play to the best of our ability. And to facilitate that, here's all of our tools. I know that this charge is going to be really important, so I'm going to measure how far away I am from that unit before I
roll
even
the
touch,
dice.
before I
That's
even
the
touch the model.
easiest thing in the world. Let's agree on this charge distance before I roll the dang dice.
Yeah, and the highest form of that is in the movement phase. Before I've moved that model, at the beginning of my turn, I go, these models are 14 and a half inches apart. I'm going to move 6 inches. Do we agree that if I roll an 8, I'm in charge range?
Yes.
Right? Because I already know that I'm going to do that. That's like the most playing to intent. I'm going to make you aware this is what I'm doing before I even pick up these models. Because then you're avoiding, in the charge phase, you go, okay, well, that looks like a 7-inch charge. And they go, I think you moved a little far. I think that's over a 7.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's actually an 8 because you moved a little far and like, you know, you kind of gave yourself a half an inch moving around this building.
Sure.
Well, if I do that before I even move, then there can't be a discussion.
It's that's going to like a pretty extreme level, but I think that's what a lot of the top, they will do these levels of thing because they don't want to move and then accidentally get themselves out of it's that agree. Do you agree this thing before I do this thing?
Yeah.
You know, do we agree that if I move here, I can see that?
Right.
Great.
Yep.
I will do this thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's that agreement ahead of time.
Yeah.
Before stuff happens and you can't go back in time and go, oh, we've disagreed now. That's weird. I should have actually got your agreement before I started doing this thing.
Yep.
Well, and really, you're measuring that anyway.
Yeah.
In the movement, you typically, if you're playing precisely,
Yeah.
you're measuring.
You want to know
what is
far.
that charge going to be if I move this unit this way? So it's just vocalizing that while you're playing.
Yes.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is takes practice.
It does.
Yeah.
You know?
It does.
You're like,
and these are the things. These are the things that competitive players do. Now, picture a scenario where a competitive player who's being very precise plays a casual player, and a casual player is like, I don't know. Okay, sure. What? Okay. There's a huge oil and water mix here, and that's kind of where things tend to fall apart when there's two different expectations for the game. Because the competitive player is expecting the player across from them to behave the same way they're doing it.
Yeah.
And they're not getting that.
So let's talk about the social contract for casual play.
Sure.
What is top priority? Top priority in casual play?
Having fun.
Having fun. Both players enjoy the game.
As long as that fun, though, can be subjective.
Yes,
as long as they agree on what that subjective is.
Right,
Yes.
because with competitive, it's laid out, it's written down. You have 20 pages. You have the event kind of culture. We understand. With casual play, that's gonna kind of be more of a social contract between you and your opponent.
Yeah, it's a very individual
Right,
between two people,
right.
or the team. It's a dynamic between two people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but the number one is we're here to have fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then winning is going to be further down.
Yeah.
And that's not number two in
Yeah.
casual play, because underneath here to have fun is we're here to make fun moments happen on the table.
Yeah.
We're here to have cool story moments, right?
Yeah.
Because for me, casual play has always involved more of the imagination.
Yeah.
And it happens in competitive events, right? Like your IG sergeant survives at Abaddon and then knocks the last wound off.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? That happens in competitive event. Everybody's going to have
But
fun.
it's usually because it's a rule that was not supposed to happen.
Right.
You're right. And it's more like, wow, that's really rare.
Yeah, well, that's really rare. The odds of that are
Right. And then, but that lights up okay, what does that look like? Right. Like,
Sure.
what did that guardsman just do to kill Abaddon? Right.
Yeah.
That's fun. Most every moment in a casual game is going to foster that kind of imagination, because
Yeah.
you're coming into it with, I want to have an experience on the tabletop where my army feels like my army.
Yeah.
And I get to imagine my army being what they are in the lore, or being what they are visually.
Mm-hmm.
I want to imagine my intercessors moving forward methodically, and
Sure.
all these different things. It feels much more like an immersive, outside of just here's the rules, here's how I'm playing.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that's higher on the social contract too.
Yeah. I would say the social contract
Yeah.
for narrative then is that, first of all, the model, there's a high paint standard when you're playing really narrative. Not high, but things have to be painted. You want to play against painted models.
It's immersion.
It's
Is
immersion.
really the number one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. I should have put that more on with narrative.
Well, for casual, it's
yeah.
different. Like casual's fun. Narrative, I think, is the immersion piece.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You're in the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're playing.
Yeah.
That's like the mind. This is like where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Is as close to that as you can get. So you want to have a table that has a reason for being what it is.
Yep.
The reason the forces are there.
Yeah.
Why they're fighting each other. What the history is.
Yeah.
And just, you build up, because in your gaming group, if you're playing narratively all the time, like you were talking about, Sean, you build up these narratives between your forces.
Yeah.
And, Carl started a campaign, the year before I moved,
Mm-hmm.
and it was, I think Aldari against Chaos,
Mm-hmm.
I think was the campaign, the Astratus campaign. And we had a bunch of Eldari players. So I literally started a Chaos army
Yeah.
to be a part of that campaign.
Yeah.
And because a bunch of my friends already had Eldar armies and we didn't have many Chaos players. So I was like, sure, I'll play Chaos.
Sure.
But
But
that
it's-
was the extent of the reasoning.
Yeah.
It was like, and they'd be fun to paint. I
Yeah.
won't play anything that I don't want to paint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But that's
yeah.
just me personally.
Well, that's you're a competitive player, I think.
Now, yes.
But you still have standards if you won't play things that you haven't painted personally.
Well, not only that, but I won't buy models that I don't want to paint. In
Yeah.
order to play them in an event. I will
Sure.
never paint Centurions. I
Yeah.
don't care how good they are.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't care.
Yeah.
Not going to do it.
That's you as a competitive player, but that still cares about that narrative element of things. And I imagine you could shift back. If you move back there, you could easily switch back. Could you? Actually, let me think about that. Could you go back?
I could go back. I'd have to change my list.
You'd have to have the Men in Black mind wipe for.
I mean, no, I would just play. I would play softer lists.
Yeah.
To be totally honest, I would
Yeah.
play lists that didn't have the tools that a
Yeah.
typical list that I would play has, and I would do things like I'd play 50 Death Company or something,
Yeah.
and just have fun with it, which
Yeah.
would be great, and I'm sure it would be fine.
Yeah.
And getting back, touching Sean on what you said about the social contract in competitive play, I think it got distilled a little too far for my taste. I think when we talk about just winning, I think that's probably the top 2% of competitive players. And I think having fun and your opponent having fun should
that's
still be
really
part of the competitive contract.
Oh
social
yeah,
contract.
I think
Because
that's number 3.
if
Yeah.
I because we've all played in a competitive game that wasn't fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
At all.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it sucks when you're traveling and
Yeah.
when your opponent just doesn't care. about your interaction with the game,
Yeah.
that sucks.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to support that at all.
No, but it's if the only consideration is winning, then it was like, hey, one of us won. Wasn't that fun?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, it wasn't.
Let me present a scenario to kind of talk about that.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to get both your takes on this.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a gotcha moment. Now, my scenario is this. I have a AdMech army. And AdMech have a strat that allows intercept. So it's a 12-inch. It's basically servo skull. It's what the Marines have.
Yeah.
So if you deep strike within 12 inches for, I think, 1 CP or 2, I don't remember, but I can intercept you with shooting.
Yep.
Now, I'm in a scenario where I have a big blob of doesn't matter, right? I have let's say a Rangers, right? Or Vanguard. Scutari, they're sitting there. A unit comes down within 12 inches. Am I obligated to remind my opponent I'm in an event now. I'm at an event in Utah. They deep strike within 12 inches. Do I remind my opponent that I have that strat?
No.
Yeah.
I think if you're at an event and you are at a certain point in your play, shall we say, I'm not talking about better player or whatever, but just if you ask at the beginning of a game.
Yeah. And
Yes.
that was going to be
Hey,
my point.
do you have anything that intercepts? Hey, do you have anything that makes me fight last? Hey,
Yeah.
do you have anything that has an auto deny, an auto explode,
Yeah.
an auto this?
Yeah.
Like, and those are just questions that you ask at the beginning of a game because nobody's expected to know everything that every other codex can do. There's simply too much information for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not all Brandon Grant, right?
Yeah.
So guys like that top half of a percent, they know what your army does. So they don't have to ask those questions. Everybody else pretty much should be asking those questions at the beginning of the game because you avoid those moments.
Yes.
And in an event, it feels bad to not have asked that question and to get intercepted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Feels bad.
Yes.
But it's not on your opponent to warn you,
Yeah.
even though you still do it, Mark. But
I do.
Yeah.
I tend to do that.
but it also depends on your opponent.
Exactly.
If you're playing, if you're 2-0 and you're playing the third game on day one, I'm not saying anything.
No, but if you're
Like,
playing somebody who's obviously
because-
new and they're brand new to an event,
Yep.
I would.
Yes.
So that's the navigation of the
Yes.
waters a little bit.
Yeah.
You have there is context here.
Yeah.
You may even have to turn off tournament mode at a tournament.
Yeah.
I did
Because-
at the Salty. I had a player that was coming back from a multi-year break.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
It was one of the. I'm still gonna win the game,
Right.
Because
Sure.
like I'm there to compete at the tournament. But it was okay. Let's start scaling a lot of this
Yes.
back.
Yeah.
Let's start it was one of those things where my opponent was really hung up on some decisions, and I started talking. Not like patronistically, right? I'm not telling him how to play his army, but I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, I know that this is like your third game of ninth ever.
Yeah.
Can I give you a little bit of input
Right.
for how you could maybe do some of this differently, in
Yeah.
the future, right? Like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Even in an event, there's context.
Yeah, and it's just read the room, read your opponent, and so I'm not saying I wouldn't say anything because I'm on my path to winning the event.
Sure.
Like I'm probably not going to win a GT maybe ever, but it's because if I'm 2-0 and you're 2-0, you're probably a pretty good player.
Yeah.
And so you're probably going to know, or if I don't say anything, you're not going to take it personally.
Yeah.
You're just going to be like, oh man, I
Fuck.
forgot they could do that.
Yep.
Yep.
Like I remember I charged into Joe's Drazhar and Incubi, and I forgot about Drazhar's leadership thing.
Yeah.
And I just forgot it.
Yeah.
And it wiped my Sanguinary Guard. And I was like, well, that really sucked.
Yeah.
But I will never forget that rule again.
Yeah,
So if you're playing somebody that, you're confident in which way the game is going, shall we say? Just be like, hey, don't forget,
That might not be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a 6-inch heroic intervention on my Sanguinary Guard.
Yeah.
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 So
It's
strat.
tricky though if you say that, because some players will take that as a are you trying to say this to psych me out to do something different?
right.
So it's a weird slippery. So
Right.
that's why even in competitive play, the baseline is, do you provide information when asked? Somebody asks you a question,
Yes.
you have to answer truthfully
Yes.
and not Like,
lie
it's
by omission.
Yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
see that
Yeah.
sometimes. You see competitive players lie by omission. They'll say, well, okay, can you do this and this? No. And then they do it. And you say, well, I asked you if you could do this. He goes, well, Strat lets me do that, but the data slate doesn't let me do.
Right.
You know, I mean,
exactly.
there's that kind of thing, which I'm like, okay, that is somebody who is obviously playing. They're missing that first social contract.
Yeah, and that's bad faith play.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's a dick.
And,
Well,
and
and
if
that's
you've
in
had that
that's in the
happen
code
to
of
you-
conduct. It's
Right.
no, you have to provide this
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, and if you've had that happen to you as a player that is entering a competitive sphere and you have that interaction,
Yep.
that could easily color your experience of competitive because you go, oh,
Yep.
these guys are dicks.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Right. And Colin, what you talked about, like if you are pretty sure you know the outcome of the game, you're going to start talking. That's why I would say winning the game is number 2, but having fun is number 3.
Yeah.
Right. If I have the game
In hand.
locked up, I'm going to be interacting with my opponent and interacting on the table in a different way where like I'm not a player to let off the brakes in a way that is obvious to or let off the gas in a way that
You
is
don't want to be
obvious my opponent.
patronizing, yes.
Because that is disrespectful.
Yeah.
Right.
it
Right.
is.
Like I'm not going to be moving off of objectives so that I don't score as many points.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, if there's something that I can do with my play that is going to make the game more fun for you, that isn't going to impact, like, so, like, hey, I'm going to decide to charge your Chaos Lord that has failed a bunch of charges and has not been able to swing that massive weapon that he has because it's not going to matter for the game and it's going to, it's going to be fun to see.
It'll make
who
you feel
wins,
good. Yeah.
Right? Like, who wins? My tooled up librarian or your Chaos Lord?
Right.
Let's find
Yeah.
out, right?
Or like, I'm not going to shoot that unit to death. I'll charge it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, it's melee combat's more fun than
Yeah.
shooting.
Yeah. For sure.
And it's just, you just make those decisions that, or you just, you can move off objectives, but if you're moving off objectives by charging things
There
to
you
like
go,
have
right?
fun
Like,
with
yeah.
it, then, or you're going to go chase down a unit that's running away or something, there are ways to do it that aren't just like, oh, I'm going to move 3.5 inches this way.
Yeah.
So I don't score these points because you suck.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't want to get paired too high next round.
Yeah.
So I'm going to submarine this game. Like there's,
Yes.
That is also
That's-
being a dick.
There's a fine line. Like, don't be a dick. That's a like line 1 of the social contract.
Yes.
And that's what it's interesting is like unless you really get in the nitty gritty and you go to enough events and see this kind of stuff, it's really hard to talk about and try to get people to understand the difference between reminding somebody in game or telling them up front. Though, if you didn't ask if I have anything to intercept or whatever, then I'm under no obligation to tell you. But what we're saying is, at some point, if you have the game in hand, and it's something that your opponent is struggling, you can see that they're kind of struggling, and sometimes when you're losing at an event, even if we tell ourselves, well, whether I win is not important. I mean, you'll try, but we can all get salty. We can all get upset. Sometimes a game lets us down.
Yeah.
And if you know that that's going to just be just a kick in the teeth of a game that's already going sideways for your opponent, I would bring it up and say, yeah, there's this.
Yeah. Because
But-
Or just not play the strat.
Or just not play it.
Or just not play the strat.
Yeah.
Just keep it in your pocket and be like,
Actually, that's probably a better way to do it. Because if you remind them, then they're going to think, they're telling me this. So this is
depends.
it's
if something's come up earlier in the game and then they asked a question and they're like, oh, well, if I move here, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's an endless number of things that can happen, but oftentimes it looks more like just keeping the strat in your pocket.
Yes.
And just being like,
That's
I don't
I'll let that
need to
happen.
fight on death on this one. I'm going to get him next round anyway.
Yeah.
Or-
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
You
probably
just-
a better option.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
One recommendation. You should be asking those questions and to avoid, because most of us, the vast majority of us, do not like confrontation over a 40K table over this kind of stuff. There are
Life's too short
right.
for that.
There are some bad apples that they are okay with that confrontation. They feed off of it.
Sure.
They're very much not representing the vast majority of the competitive. To save myself these discussions, I ask, how familiar are you with my army?
Right. That's a good question.
That is such a great question because it gives them the opportunity to tell you themselves, I only know a little bit or I'm familiar with this. And then you can go, okay, let me make you aware of something that I just want you to know about. If you feel like your army has something like that.
Yeah.
And if somebody asks you that, be honest with them.
Yes.
Don't like sell yourself out, but I asked that to an opponent. I said, how familiar are you with my army? And this was at a event back in 8th. And he said, oh, I play against Dark Angels all the time. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, sweet.
Sweet.
Here we go.
Okay, so you know my
Let's
army,
go.
right? And so he makes this big play. He like advances and charges with a unit, and he locks up a Leviathan Dreadnought. And so on my turn, I pay 2 command points, play Implacable, fall back with the Leviathan Dreadnought, and shoot. And he was mad. Why didn't you tell me you could do that? You saw that I was charging your model, and I went, I don't know what you're planning, man. Like, but this is like the Dark Angel strat right now in 8th. Like, that was one of the big ones.
Yeah.
I have this ability to do this. You told me you played against my army all the time.
Right.
I kind of felt like you would know that it was a thing.
That's a gotcha moment.
Right?
Yep.
And I was not trying to gotcha hammer him. If he had told me a little bit more accurately, I would have had a different view, right? Like, I would have been like, hey, by the way, you seem to be putting a lot of work into tying up this Leviathan. Because for me, I was like, maybe it's worth it for me to spend the 2 CP.
Because there's ways he could have tied it, because he could have wrapped. There's ways he probably may, but maybe not in that moment. But
yeah, I can't remember this situation enough.
Honestly, I still wouldn't. Oh, I don't have to run through every strat in my codex.
No.
But
if
at a
it
certain
was
point,
when I'm playing an army that is built around 2 Leviathans always shooting,
yeah,
right. I told people if I ask him how familiar are you with my army, and they're like, I don't know that model, and I don't really know Dark Angels.
Right.
I'm like, okay, so let's talk about the Leviathan real quick. You need to be prepared because it's 8th edition Leviathan, and then also I would be like, and by the way, if you tie me up, I can fall back and shoot for 2 CP.
right.
Well, it would have been, so then really the thing about competitive players though, and this is where the casual players get mixed, if they get mixed up in this, then they get pretty upset. But a competitive player, you can be upset. Like, so he could have gotten upset about that. But truthfully, if he was a true, he would have been like, all right, well, that's true.
Didn't know
That is something he should have just eaten.
That sucks. That's a nice strat. I wish I had that strat.
That's a good strat. I wish I'd have known that. But then he should know next time to ask that question.
Yes.
So a true competitive player who plays with the spirit of competition would either ask those questions ahead of time. If they get gotcha'd, quote unquote, if something happens to them and they didn't think to ask first, and it happens, they should know their opponent is under no obligation to tell them every little thing that happens and to warn them. There's no warnings.
Yep.
They should have known to ask that ahead of time. So that's that, right? I mean, there's no obligation to remind anyone. But that's the difference between competitive versus casual.
Yeah.
So
you throw a curveball O2? I forgot you had a curveball.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't going to tell you I'm throwing you a curveball. What are you talking about?
Exactly. Right. And that's it.
Yep.
When you play at an event, that's the thing about competitive plays. In order to make some of the ambiguous nature of the game a little more concrete, you play with intent before you roll the dice. You roll the dice so somebody can see. Right off the bat, you have to roll the.
Don't roll behind terrain.
Do never roll behind.
If you accidentally do, let them see the dice.
Pick up failures.
Yes,
pick up failures, not successes.
You use tokens for effects that are persistent. You put these little tokens. You're supposed to use tokens for these things. You make sure players agree on measurements. You make sure that the line of sight makes sense. You move with precision and you move fairly quickly. And these are all the elements of sort of they used to be etiquette. The code of conduct has these much more specific now because this is what you need to make a game that some people say is not competitive. Yes. These are the way you say, you get rid of some of the gray areas of this game with the dice and the measuring and the line of sight and the non-hex based thing that is 40K.
Yeah.
So new players won't know any of this stuff. So when they come to an event, they may be a little bit shell shocked.
Yeah, but for the first game, maybe 2.
Yeah.
But the wonderful thing about Swiss pairings is you're probably going to end up playing
somebody else
people
that's pretty
at your level pretty quick. So
Yeah.
I don't typically fly with the Eagles at the top of the event unless something's gone horribly wrong and I score a bunch of points round 1.
You and I look at each other after round 2 and go, we're flying too close to the sun,
this is
Colin.
bad. This is bad. That was like Boise Cup where I scored, I think, 94, 96 points round 1 and played Brandon Grant round 2, which was a wonderful game. And it was cool to play Brandon, but like that was a learning experience. Like, oh, he's even playing a different game than I'm playing.
Yeah. He's thinking at different levels. There are some bad habits of competitive players, though, that we kind of have to point out, right? And we've mentioned a couple of them. But some of it is winning outside of the game. You know, you're charming, you through charm or through just flat bullying or intimidation.
Yes.
You're telling somebody the rule is wrong when it is right.
Yeah.
You're so sure. No, this is how it's played. And there's not even like a moment of doubt. and
Yep.
you could be wrong.
If you're ever in an event and there is a confrontation like that, or is there even a question, or even something you don't agree on, just go get a judge.
Call a judge and
Just
ask
get
for
a
the
judge.
rules.
That's why they're there.
Yep.
There is nothing wrong with getting a judge.
Yep.
If a person is there in good faith, they
Yep.
will never mind getting a judge to make a call ever.
Exactly.
Sure, go get a judge.
Yeah, get a
Let's
judge.
just get a ruling. We don't even have to talk about it anymore. Just
Yeah.
get a ruling and
Yeah.
we'll move on with the game. It's
That's
no
what
big
they're there
deal.
for.
And
Yeah.
I think there's a stigma, or people try to put a stigma on getting a judge
Yeah.
to your table to make a call. But if somebody's acting in bad faith, I don't care if a judge is standing there the whole game.
Yeah.
Don't care,
Yeah.
because that's the point, is we're going to play this clean.
Yeah.
And if somebody, so you don't even have to get into that social situation. If there's a question, just get a judge. That's why they're
For
there.
sure.
Yeah,
For
if,
sure.
if you cannot resolve it after, like, oh, well, this. Oh, well, this. Oh, well, we
Like,
disagree.
well, I don't
Okay,
agree
well,
on that reading.
All right, let's
go
go
get a
grab a
judge.
judge.
Yeah.
It's that quick.
For
But
sure.
so many players will defer to like a more experienced player,
Yeah.
or a
Or
more
they're-
more verbose player, or
Yeah.
a more intimidating player.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
they'll be like, "Oh, okay, sorry. You know, I
And
guess
some
my
players,
friend was wrong."
They'll use that.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yep.
We have to point that out. There's gray areas in this game. People
Yeah.
misremember rules all the time. Now, when
Yep.
I do it, usually it's against me, but oftentimes people will do it, and there's enough of a gray area where they're like, I don't know if it was a true, like they're cheating, but it's a vaguish thing that they can always claim ignorance.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that becoming less of a thing
Right.
with stuff being streamed and
Yeah.
these things
Yeah.
kind of getting uncovered.
Typically, you'll see that player's attitude change when they're talking to a judge
Yeah,
versus talking to
absolutely.
their opponent.
Or
You
play
know,
another top
all of a-
player.
or play another
Yep.
top player. All of
Yep.
a sudden, they're very precise. All of a sudden, they're very nice. They're very easygoing.
Yep.
Like, it's just, and this is a very, very uncommon thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This does
for
not
sure.
happen often.
Sure. Some other bad habits we've talked about is not telling everyone, not being upfront with what the Army does. So if somebody asks you a question, you really need to go out of your way to explain exactly why. Because in my mind, I want to avoid a gotcha moment. So
Yes.
I will over communicate. Now, if they
Yeah.
don't listen when I tell them that,
Right.
that's on
That's
them.
on them.
I had a situation in Utah where I have rangers, right, that have the guys on dogs that have rifles that are sniper rifles. You can
Right.
ignore lookout, sir. And it was a dark Eldar player, and his radar blew up, and his succubus, he put his succubus down, and I said,
I'm going to shoot
"Hey,
that.
I got to remind you, these guys have sniper rifles." Because even if I would explain that at the very beginning, he would not have remembered.
Right.
And he wasn't having a good game. His game was going a little sideways on him.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Okay, no, it's fine. So of course, what happens? I shoot, and the succubus is left with one wound, but another vehicle explodes next to it. That wound kills her, and then done. And he was really upset. But part of me is like, I feel okay because I
Right.
told him exactly what I was
Yep.
going to do.
Right. Yep.
Now I was oversharing. I didn't need to do any of that. But
Yeah.
in my mind, it was a situation where I wanted to make sure he understood, so that when it happens, he doesn't
Yeah.
get completely caught out.
Well, and you as a player, you have to get to your comfort level of how you can feel good walking away from a game,
Yes.
knowing you played it how you wanted to play.
Yeah.
So, like with my Blood Angels have some tricks, and typically I'll be like, how familiar are you with Blood Angels? Oh, I've played them once. It's like, okay, well, these are my Death Company. They get a pregame move.
Yep.
So that in deployment, they can go, oh, those guys with jump packs get a pregame move. I should deploy accordingly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that I'm not just like, oh, these guys moved 24 inches in charge turn one.
Yeah.
Hello. And they're like,
Yeah,
dude, what is going on here? Like,
Yeah.
so there's a comfort level. The more you play in a competitive atmosphere, there's a comfort level with where do you stop sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it depends, as you get more experience, it depends on who you're playing. It depends on the game state. But you have to feel good walking away from the table
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Even if it costs you a game. If you're like, well, I played it clean. I played a good game. I played a clean game.
Yeah, exactly. I did everything I could to ensure that exactly that first social contract, Sean, was met.
Yeah.
And then social contract, so remind us again, what was that first one? When you're playing competitive, the very number one is...
To the best of our ability, we will play to the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, and
We will
that as
play
long
a
as you...
clean and precise game. By
And,
the rules.
and remember that when you're playing.
Yeah.
But let's talk about casual players. They have some bad habits too. They do.
Yeah.
Now, these habits don't really come out unless you're playing them in a more competitive sense, right? So casual players that are just playing with their friends, none of this really matters. It doesn't really matter that much,
Yeah,
right?
right.
It's usually when a casual player stumbles into an event or they're curious about going to an event and they don't know all the stuff we talked about or these etiquette rules, things that are not written in the book. A casual player showing up going to an event probably doesn't know the rules that well. Right. And the rules are sort of, they're a little bit sloppy. They may not play to the rules. The rules might be misremembered. They're spending more time, building models or what have you. They may not know the rules. They may be slower.
They may know the rules to a level that is very functional for how they play, but they don't know the full, let me give you an example. 8th edition tri-pointing.
Sure.
You can know the rules of charging and movement and piling in and consolidating and not know how to tri-point.
Yep.
Right? Tri-pointing is allowed by the rules. You know the rules, but you don't understand that full ramifications of if I move completely, if I don't touch you and I space surf you and right? That's where I would kind of, because again, I don't necessarily want this to be a value judgment of if you are casual, you have less rules understanding. Typically it is, if you are casual, you are not running into these edge case ramifications of rules wording.
Yeah. Or the rules are not as important as having a good time.
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
you can know units consolidate, but you don't necessarily know like the first one has to consolidate closest to closest, and then the other guys just have to end up closer.
Yeah.
And then you have to stay in coherency the whole time. And
exactly.
And if you don't activate to fight, you don't get to it's just
It feels
all
like
of these
it feels like wizardry when it's used against you. You're like, what the heck?
You're like, wait, well, how are you moving that far? And you're like, well, I'm just piling in and consolidating.
Yeah.
But that gives me like 7 inches of movement.
Yeah.
So,
and that's why the disconnect happens.
Yes.
Casual players are slower players because they're used to more of a leisurely pace. If they're just playing with their friends and they show up to an event, they just play slower. They're
still do
chatting,
that.
talking.
You've gotten a lot better. You've gotten a lot better.
Yeah, because that's been a focus,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because you're now going to events.
Yes.
So, because you didn't have to worry about it for a while.
No, you just sit around and
Something-
bullshit. Who cares if you only get 3 turns done?
Yeah, who
Like,
cares?
doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
great time.
Yeah, we're having a good time. Let's go have some beers afterwards. Yeah, whatever.
Sloppy.
Sloppy play.
Sloppy
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
Lazy play tends to be the issue with casual players when they're playing a competitive player. When they're playing against another casual player, it's fine. But when they're playing against a player who, and even a narrative player who's really precise, the precision of the game, some casual players can be very sloppy.
Yeah.
Like, I'll
with
move
their
this guy
play.
8 inches. Like, don't even touch the tape measure.
Yeah.
Just zoop.
Yeah,
And
just
you're like,
push
hey,
him,
yes.
Can you measure that for me, please?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to move the front guy, and then I'm just going to pick up the unit and drop him behind him.
Right.
And that unit went from a kind of oblong spaced out to now they're in a tight circle.
Yeah.
I played that guy at a tournament.
Right. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, that front guy did only move your distance, but now if they make a charge, so many more models are now in fight range.
Yeah.
Right? Or in engagement range, which they wouldn't have been in before. Those kind of things.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter in a casual game.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, it's just not as much of not as much of a focus. It's just getting
absolutely,
there.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we moved and they're there and we know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that competitive play, can 40K be a competitive game? And I think that there's a lot of ambiguity. Some people would say no, but I think it is in the fact that, like we just said, there are points. Usually, the more skilled player with the better list wins. The person who knows more wins the game and has more experience. There's a level there. It's not like it's just a completely random game.
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff you have to do to make it less ambiguous that you got to learn when you start to play at events.
Like, it's absolutely a competitive game.
Yeah,
It is absolutely a competitive
Somebody
game.
wins.
It is on the, like Sean was saying earlier, it's a spectrum.
Yep.
Chess is at one end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And like water balloons are at the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So 40K is closer to chess than throwing water balloons at each other in the backyard.
Yeah.
But it is, it's as competitive as you want it to be. And just, you can't take it as seriously as you take like an international chess ranking.
Yes.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist because you're not playing that precise of a game.
No.
And I think something that's a theme that I've been harping on a lot recently is just accepting 40K for what it is makes it a more enjoyable experience for me.
Yeah.
And just knowing there's a limit to how precise this game is. There's
Yep.
a limit
Yeah.
to how precise the rules are. There's a limit to how much knowledge I have, and that's directly related to how much time I'm willing to spend trying to memorize rules.
Yeah.
And that affects how well, quote unquote, I can play this game.
Yeah.
Yep.
If I wanted to win GTs, I would stop painting as much and
Yep.
spend more time memorizing rules and practicing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd be playing a lot more. That's
Absolutely.
for sure. Narrative play, it's competitive in a different way. Like when we played the Crusade game, I found myself, the missions I didn't care about winning, because the way Crusade is that the agendas, which are basically the agendas are like secondaries.
Yeah.
Right.
They're the agendas you do. I was more focused on the agendas because the agendas got me additional experience points, which leveled up units.
Right.
If I won a mission, I got supply points. I didn't care as much, right?
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. I didn't lose them. But I played like an Alpha Legion Space Marine list. So to me, the mission didn't matter as much as getting the agendas, right?
Right.
So it's a different level. You're trying to accomplish something, but it's a real story-driven thing. So winning, quote unquote, the game doesn't matter. It's anything that helps to improve the story of your models. And in this case with Crusade, it's how do I get experience points to make my models do these things? Or I want to roll to see what the wound is because I want this model to have this weird kind of, it has a -1 to whatever because it's, it has a problem, like it's suffering
Battle
an
scar.
eye injury or
Yeah.
battle scar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's different. You're not trying to win the game necessarily, but you're definitely trying to tell a story.
Right.
And I think that's why Crusade works. To me, 40K in its purest form is probably that,
Yeah.
but there's other ways to play it. And I think that's the beauty of the system.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to Games Workshop that they made a narrative system that doesn't necessarily reward just winning the primary mission.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it kind of weeds out some players whose only concern is winning the primary mission and be like, I won the game. And you're like, great, I leveled up my canoness or whatever.
Cool. Yeah, I this guy killed this guy.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
was cool.
Yep.
It's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There's no such thing as a perfect game of 40K. We all know that. The issue then is when we describe competitive, which we've gone into a great deal on, casual, and narrative, when they are playing each other. For some weird reason, let's say they get matched up, they're not playing in their own groups, they have different expectations of the game. And that's, I think, is where a lot of the feel bads come from.
Yeah.
That's when a lot of the issues happen. And that's when people swear off events because this thing happened to me, because this is what happened to me, because my expectation was this, and this is what happened.
Yeah.
So,
And I will say the feel bads are not only, I just want to point this out, not only just casual players entering a competitive event and that mismatch. We've all seen people that show up to a narrative or some casual event with an army that you're like, you should know better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
bad,
so
bad faith narrative play is a problem.
That's like the worst.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
That's
right?
absolutely the worst because you knew the social contract going into it and just blatantly was just like, don't care.
Yeah.
I'm here to win games.
Yeah.
Get wrecked.
Yeah. Oh, hey, look, I took this ridiculous thing.
I'm just here to own noobs.
Yeah, exactly, right?
That's my idea of a good Saturday.
If you are doing that you are why narrative and casual players dislike competitive players.
Yeah.
Well, because you're going in as a whether you like it or not, or whether you even accept it, you're going in as a representative of competitive players.
Yeah.
You are showing up to that event.
Yeah.
Like if I show up to an event because I play on Thursday nights and because I go to events, I'm going to get that label competitive player. It doesn't matter what my list is at that event. I'm going to get labeled a competitive player walking through the door, and it's on me to play in the environment that I'm playing.
Yeah.
And if you just go and roll and just steamroll noobs all day, then you're gonna confirm everything that they say about competitive players.
Yep.
Everything they think, they're gonna be like, well, these guys just want to win at all costs and blah blah blah. And you're just there proving them right. So congratulations. And none of your competitive player friends are gonna give a darn that you won that event, quote unquote.
Right.
That you went and pwned noobs all day on Saturday. Like nobody's gonna care. Nobody's gonna look at that and say, wow, great job, man. That was a really good showing with a really unique list. Like,
how many ITC points you get? Well, it wasn't an ITC.
It wasn't
event.
an ITC event.
Okay. All right. Then doesn't really count.
I got a paint holder in the raffle. It's like, good job. Well, good job.
I think that the question then is there a way to accommodate all types of players? And we usually, it's tough, and I don't think you can do it in one event unless you've got players that are flexing, a little bit one way or the other.
Yeah.
You can have players flex, to play more casually or to play more, casual, can play a little more competitive. They can learn a little more what it's like to be part of that.
There used to be an event in the Bay Area that this is an extreme example, but everybody would play with the same Space Marine list.
Oh, that's
And it would be like 2 tactical squads, a bike squad, a dreadnought, like 2 rhinos, and like
that's a really fun idea.
the same list. But it was like 10 or 12 people.
Yeah.
But it was like a really cool idea.
It's stock car racing for 40K.
And then you're like, okay, cool. So you all have the same tools.
Yeah.
You know, but it's with a game that has physical models, it's tough.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you think that, okay, this is a side tangent, but we think about like what does a competitive circuit mean? You just mentioned stock car racing. I almost feel like if every codex had the army that was the quote unquote the match play army that you had to play, everything was exactly the same, and maybe every season they change it around.
Yeah.
But if you were the Custodes player and you played the Custodes, and every single one of those was matched accordingly, then you would see. And then it helps if it was the same exact army, because then it is just literally like chess.
Yep.
Right.
But it would be interesting because it would remove that variable of army list tweaking and changing, which so many players rely on to win.
But that's also a skill.
That is a
It's
skill.
a huge part of the game.
Also a skill is getting that toolbox and figuring all that stuff out. And
That's true.
That's, I think, it's a tough skill.
It is
strong. A tough skill.
I don't have it necessarily. I can see things that I think are tough, but I miss things all the time.
Yeah. I mean,
constantly.
hey, we have some game.
Yeah.
We come up with some cool stuff here and there, but like we're not obviously
theory
not
crafting
Lennon or
the
anybody
next,
like that, but even like the next tier. But so that was an interesting event. But I think the best way to do it, quote unquote, is like a narrative kind of flavored event where the TO vets lists.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have to have a TO that's willing to tell people no.
Yeah.
You cannot play this list. Try again.
Yeah.
And if you can't get it together, just don't come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the rest of us are agreeing to play by these conditions.
Yeah.
If you can't agree to play by these conditions, I'm not going to let you come and ruin 3 people's day with your bullshit.
And I think that's the hardest kind of event to run. Like it's one thing to run a competitive event and say this is, and advertise it as such. Competitive event for ITC points. It's an RTT done.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what they're getting into when they go to that event. It's harder to run a casual event, and it's really hard. It's even harder to run a narrative event because a narrative event you kind of want a certain paint standard because that's important for players who are narrative, and it's hard to enforce that. So
it's going to be more than battle ready than 3-color battle ready for a competitive event.
And
right?
it's harder to do with people you don't know.
Yes.
It's hard to have people you don't know come to your event.
Yeah.
Like when we did narrative events in the Bay Area, it was just all of us friends hanging out for a day playing 40K.
A structured play date, basically.
Yeah, basically. And which were amazing. They're so much fun.
I'm sure they were a lot of fun.
But, it's harder to just open it up to the public and say this is the standard because it's a hard it's hard. Not everybody wants to paint their models up to a battle ready standard. Not everybody enjoys that. So, but they want to come play. And I'd rather have, that person than the person that is like, well, I'll take this unit out of my competitive list and bring that. That's getting into value judgments and stuff. But it's also hard as a TO. And it's hard a lot of people just as a person, it's hard to be like, no, you can't do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And stick to that.
For sure.
And have that person, maybe somebody will be upset.
Yeah. Because
maybe you have to explain it to them.
Most of the time that's going to be a subjective thing. You'll see events that will be like, no, this, right? Like I would see events that would be like, no, Lords of War.
Yeah.
Right? And it was targeting like, knights or, something like that. So you can put some limits on it, but at the end of the day, it's kind of because
at the end of the day, that guy's still going to find
he's still going to find something around
find
it,
a way.
right?
Yeah.
So it's going to come down to a subjective call on the TO's part. And then outside of the events, because I think a lot of our listeners are never going to run an event.
Sure.
If you are playing against somebody that you don't know or that probably plays in a different style than you, open with communication.
Yeah. You need to find out what kind of game they want. What is their expectations?
Gotta talk. Like just Thursday, I was sitting around. I have my army. I only brought my tournament army because I'm still trying to get a few reps on that. And I saw a player. I know him from high school. We've known each other for a while, but I also know that probably he doesn't have the super tool. This is lean fat. Where this is my tournament list.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to him. I was like, hey, how competitive of a game are you looking for tonight? Here's what I have, and that gave him the chance to go, well, I have like the best Ultramarines that I have, but I don't think it's like a highly tooled list. And at that point, it was like, there was another player with kind of that same idea, like, hey, I have some stuff. I think it's an okay list, but it's okay.
Yep.
They were able to play against each other, and then Ben and I with these like monster, what we try to design as monster lists, are able to then play and get a good game. I would have loved to have played the player, and if we had, I would have changed. I can't change my list. I don't have different models.
You would have taken,
I would have changed how I'm approaching the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Ben's list is C tier, but
yeah, except he plays it and pilots it. It's really, really good.
For what it does, it's a monster.
Yeah,
it's a
I mean,
monster.
ideally we would like, because I've played that game on Thursday.
Yeah.
I played that game where I had, my Monster Mash list with like Magnus, Morty, and it's like, here's this Imperial Guard player, and you're like,
yeah. And how do you?
There's no way to neuter this list that I'm not just like not playing.
Yeah.
But like ideally, and I mean, even playing the list, the 14 Armiger meme list is a skew list. And people are going to have a real bad time trying to play that list if they don't have any tools. Or if they have like, I have one high strength weapon in my army. Like,
I took a dev squad with some las cannons. That's my anti-tank.
So that's one.
Okay, that's dead.
So that's one Armiger. What about the other 13? So, but it's like it's almost to the point where like we should bring a sideboard of like 1,000 points.
Before, yeah.
You just have 1,000 point sideboard in the car, and if you get matched into that person, you're like, let me go grab a couple models and have a secondary list that just isn't as tooled up as the primary list.
And with a starting league this August, that is my plan. I will start bringing more than just my tournament list.
Yeah.
Because
I think
now we're trying to facilitate play across all of these different focuses.
Yeah, because essentially what you want to do is pair up people with the same expectations and also have the same level of experience.
Right.
And
it's a better game.
It is a better game.
It's more fun.
Yeah.
I don't want to dunk on some guy with not that I'm not even that great of a player. Like I went 3-2 at the last event. I mean, but it's not. But there's just an approach.
Yeah, there's
to the game.
Yeah, I think so. We had a casual event that that somebody was running recently, and they put the event out there, and they had heard that some more tough players were coming, and so what they were doing was they started to kind of put some things out there. So originally it was like, okay, 2,000 points, this is this. So then they said, well, okay, let's drop it down to 1,750. Yeah. Finally, I said, you should probably just say no ITC points. And that will basically eliminate anyone who is a quote unquote competitive, who's looking to get points. Because if they think they can get points and that they care about that, they will show up and they don't care what you advertise the event as. So it was 2 games, 2 3.5 hour games, and it was 1,750 and no ITC. Bring just whatever new players. The whole point is we want to take the newer players and give them enough experience that if they want to play competitive, they become competitive players. Yeah. If they want to play more casual or narrative, they become more narrative. But we want to give them the experience so that they get more in the game because these are newer players. Yeah. Because newer players don't, they can go. They have paths in front of them. They can do whatever they want. We're not sure, but all we want to do is get them in the game to do more.
And just get them playing in a structured environment.
Playing them in a structured environment. Yeah.
And be like, this is cool.
Yeah.
I like this.
Sometimes playing against a stranger is a good thing. It gets you out of kind of, and you get some games in. So
those first, Saturday tournaments that I played really hooked me. Right? Yeah. Like that was a big part of me really getting into 40K.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that I really liked about the first Boise Cup that I played in was like, okay, I have 3 hours to play you.
Yeah.
Let's play. Yeah. Like, okay, that was a fun game. And then you go to the next game. And you're like, oh, we have 3 hours to play. Like,
new person. I don't know. Meeting people,
hey, how's it
making
going?
friends.
Cool on me. Yeah. So that was really fun for me. And that's what keeps me going to events and engaging in that is that I like that structure.
I would say that casual players probably also want some level of that. They may want to play in more of a narrative as well.
Yeah.
I kind of think, and this is something we'll see how the Boise Cup evolves, but I would love to have, to me, what has worked out in the past is to have a matched play event, but have as next to that a narrative event or new
friendly.
or friendly
Yeah,
event.
friendly. Yep.
Because the friendly event, because it's basically because if friendly people can come to a friendly event knowing that anyone who wants to win is over there playing that
right.
game.
Yeah,
Right.
everybody that wants the points is in that room.
It's over
beating up
there.
on each other.
Yeah.
So automatically, the people I'm playing already have the set expectations that I do. And yeah, there may be a shark that gets into that friendly pool, but they're not getting anything out of it.
No.
You know?
Yeah, right.
And so I think that to me is the best way to run like a bigger event is to have both.
Yeah.
And if you are purposefully entering a friendly with a mean list because you want to win the thing to build yourself up,
you should feel very
Let's just
bad.
do some self-reflection.
yeah, you need
Yeah.
to take a step back and think about why you're doing that. Just
Yeah.
honestly.
Go outside and touch some grass.
Touch some grass. Just, come on. Like, what is that doing for
I agree.
you?
That's the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're not just you're it's not because it's so self-centered that you're doing active damage to the community.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a bad
Right.
thing.
I'm going to go inflict myself on these people for five games.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that is the breakdown of the three types of players and kind of the situations where things can go sideways, but also ways that we can make sure that they're playing each other.
Yes.
They're both getting the games that they want to
don't
get.
need to be exclusive.
Because there's such a big sandbox to play
Yeah.
40K.
Yeah.
It's so subjective and really GW gives you because of just the
Yeah.
way the game works with tape measures and tables, and they give you, I mean, they even went to minimum tables. You could play on a 10 foot by 10 foot table if you want to.
Yeah.
And it would be legal 40K.
Some of the 5th edition of APOC tables that I
man.
played on were so much fun.
Firing basilisks from this table
Oh,
onto
yeah.
that table.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's awesome. So there's such a big sandbox that you can play however you want to play.
Yeah.
And this is a conversation that never ends. There's no definitive anything.
I think
but
the only thing we can say is that find people that have the same level of expectations for the game they want as you do, or can move and shift, because no one really, very few people play it one way.
Yeah.
I would love to take a narrative. I'd love to go to a narrative event and take a narrative list.
I wanted to do Taylor's thing the other day.
Yeah.
That would have been fun.
A super casual narrative event.
And if you don't know what the other player's expectations are, just ask.
Yep.
Just
And
ask.
have that
Communication.
conversation. Don't assume that you
Yeah.
know why that person is there or
sure.
what they want out of the game, and just ask. Maybe you'll make a friend.
All right, for sure. The best part about the game is meeting new people. It's the community. And I know it sounds so cheesy, and people get tired of hearing it.
Our
but it
tagline is
true.
build a better community.
All my
So I
friends
think
in
we can
Boise
go
are
there,
play
right?
40K.
Like,
Well,
All of my friends in Boise play 40K.
and you turn around and you find out, well, who are my friends? My friends are all the people I play the games with. You move to another city.
Yeah.
You go to the store. Who are the people that play? Boom. Here's an instant set
There's a
of
social net you can
brand
just
new
plug
social
into.
friends that you
Yeah.
have. So there's a real power to that.
Yeah.
I think.
And I look forward to the next big event. Not this year, but the next big event that I can go to. Even Boise Cup, I experience this because I get to see friends that I haven't seen since the last event that we saw each other at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right?
for sure.
Like,
Yeah.
it's a cool social experience.
The Las Vegas Open is definitely
Yeah,
Well,
LVO is the one.
LVO, I'll meet friends that I've had for years that I've never actually met in person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
We just know each other from just chatting online and doing all that, but we've known each other for 4 or 5 years. But I'll never met him.
Yeah.
I'll meet him in January.
That's going to be a good time for sure. And the LVO, we should point out, has lots of different things. They have a match play, huge event. They have the narrative thing. I think they have one, and they also have a friendly event. They cater to the three types of
They have
types.
narrative doubles. They have Space Hulk. They have
The point of all that is anyone who
wants.
wants to have whatever expectations they can do.
Yep.
there.
Yeah,
All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back. We'll do our second topic.
sweet.
Thank you for listening to The Battle Host. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us by becoming a patron of the show. You can find us at patreon.com/thebattlehost. We rely on the generous donations of the community to help us with the cost of running the show and staying engaged with the 40K community. Whichever amount you choose to give, you'll get access to our Discord chat where we discuss all things related to the hobby. Visit us at patreon.com/thebattlehost, and thanks again for your continued support of our show. So we all have them. We have closets, shelves, and drawers filled with pieces and parts of half-completed hobby projects. As I look around the room here, I can see several half-completed armies. One is a Space Marine army that's in a container that I used for Crusade. I never finished. I have 1,000 Suns, which have probably about 50% finished. And then I have a Necron army that's sitting up on top of a shelf up there that are mostly built and primed. So I am really pretty good example of the fact that you have all these ideas for armies, and sometimes you get started on an army and you get excited about an army that you're sure will be awesome, but somewhere along the way you kind of you give up or abandon them.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about like when you should start an army project, what are the things you should consider before you start, when you should abandon or end a hobby project, when you cut your losses. And then we'll also talk a little bit about like when is an army done? Like when do you finish an army? So, so this is a listener question from a Discord user named Galen, who's on our Discord, and go ahead and read what he.
Yeah. So this is what spawned us approaching this as a topic, not just a listener mail discussion.
Yeah.
It was a 2-part question. How do you know when to give up on a project you are struggling with?
Yeah.
On the flip side, how do you know when to call an army done, i.e. stop adding to it, stop improving paint jobs, stuff in that vein, is what Galen asked. And we looked at this and we went, that's a big enough discussion. We're going to do it as its own thing.
Let's break it out. So before we get into what Galen's mentioning, let's talk about starting.
Yeah.
And so, Colin,
my favorite.
Yes. Sometimes the starting is always like it's the planning stages. It's where all the hopes are there. It's where everything.
Endless possibilities.
Spending time in my mind palace.
Yes. And it's all about what is this army going to look like. Now you just started a knight army. Tell us a little bit about, and you're in the middle of it. Yep. You have a bunch of it done, and you're moving on it. But tell us about the Knight Army and how you got started with that.
No, so the idea for the Knight Army came about when I actually started painting Adeptus Titanicus, because I had the Legio Defensor that I paint for the Titans, and I really wanted to lavish attention on the Titans.
Yeah.
But the box comes with these little knights, which I didn't really want to spend time on.
Sure.
So the Titanicus force was set in this kind of overgrown world that had been reclaimed by nature. That was the basing and the tile that I made for pictures and stuff. And so I was thinking about kind of what a knight force abandoned on the world, what would happen.
Yeah.
And that the kind of world spirit would start to reclaim, like, because the world has started to reclaim like the edifices of civilization and things like that. But what if a knight, like a lance of knights, a house of knights, was left to kind of guard the planet? What effect would that world spirit have on those knights?
Yeah.
But it's not like malignant. It's like chaotic neutral.
I think they've gone native, basically.
Yeah, they've gone feral.
feral,
Essentially,
yeah.
Which I call like my feral knight project.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I really want to play with texture. I don't want to do a bunch of precision work on these guys. I don't want to take a lot of time. And so I ended up just playing around, and it was like no pressure. It was like test models, basically.
Yeah.
And so I just ended up doing a bunch of like flock and sand and PVA and kind of putting them on the model, and just focusing on like literal rocks on the model, using oils and just getting more of a feeling than like a precise paint scheme. Yeah. Because they're pretty much just green and gray. And then when I finished them, I was really, really happy with them.
And these are the knights in the Adeptus Titanicus.
Yeah.
So you painted so Adeptus Titanicus, you love painting those things. You don't play the game, but you love painting.
Never played it. They're some of my favorite things to paint.
How big is just a standard like a warhound? Is it as size of like a dreadnought?
In Titanicus, a warhound is the size of, it's smaller than a Space Marine dreadnought. It's like a weapon platform, Eldar weapon platform. They're pretty small. A knight is the size of like a tactical marine.
That's actually a really cool scale to play with.
It's incredible. So even the War Master Titan is like smaller than an Imperial Knight.
Okay.
And it's like a Reaver's maybe Wraithlord sized.
Okay.
It's so much fun.
So that is purely a thing you paint just for the joy of painting, and then you're like,
I'll play one day.
Okay, well, maybe you do, or maybe you don't. I don't know, whatever. But you develop the story behind it, because oftentimes when you have Titans, there's a story. I mean, they're just not just playing around. There's a reason for the actual maniple of Titans to exist.
And they're Titans.
Yeah.
Like they're Titans. So each one is a character, basically. And with Titanicus, you don't need a lot of models.
Yeah.
So each one, like I'm a batch painter, but I paint like one Titan at a time.
Yeah.
So it's just a really cool painting exercise. And you're painting Titans, which rules.
Yeah. But then the knight part, you go, okay, I want these to be more like I'm not super into painting them. I want them to be more of a texture exercise.
Right.
They're going to be the feral knights. So there's going to be rocks and wood and greenery and things like
chains
that.
And rope and skulls. And
So then you have that. You've painted those knights. What made you decide, okay, these 2 knights in this Adeptus Titanicus, I want to replicate that at full size?
Yeah, so I just thought, like, well, what would this look like at 28 millimeter scale for a project? And the goal being, okay, if I want to do knights, what would that look like? And I don't want another technically precise army. Because my Blood Angels are a very technically precise army. There's a lot that goes into them. There's a lot of edge highlighting, a lot of detail, the little blood drops and the wings, and I love it. I love painting it, obviously. But when I'm starting projects, just like I did with my Blood Angels, I ask myself, like, what am I doing with this project that's different from other projects that I've done? What am I going to learn a new skill? Am I going to shut my brain off and just paint, which is what I do with my knights. Moving to 28 millimeter, it was all texture. It was working with enamels, working with oils.
Something you're not doing with Blood Angels. It's a different type of sort of thing you're doing for the hobby.
It's a completely different approach. And it's imprecise. It's completely textural. There's no edge highlighting. I don't use a brush all that much. There's a lot of sponging that goes on. So it's just a totally different painting experience. I had a couple Armiger Helverin from Aaron from TraderA.com, sponsor the show. And I was like, well, I'll just try it out on these 2 and see how that looks, because it would be a fun thing to do. Tried it out, loved it. It was super fun to do. I really like doing like verdant green basing and like it's just a fun project. And then talking to Ben, he was like, oh yeah, I've got this 14 Armiger list that is fun to play. And that kind of planted a seed. And then I'm like, Well, not only is that a project that paints up different than Blood Angels, it plays a lot different than Blood Angels. And it's a secondary project, and it paints fast. I can blow through painting these things. It took longer to assemble these than it did to paint them. And because I'm just airbrushing and using texture and washes for the most part, the drying times was really the longest part. But it fulfills a different niche than the Blood Angels project.
So it starts with just a interesting so really
sounds like an interesting idea.
It's like it's a theme. Then okay, here's how I can execute this with the single test model. Then it's like, okay, that's cool, but what kind of kicks it in is like, how might this play? So like it's an interesting different thing to play. And so once okay, I want to play it, that's like the trifecta, right? You have this idea for how you want to build and paint it. You have the idea for like, what are the how might it play? But then that third element is, how is this different than what I'm already doing? And then with those 3 things in mind, that becomes kind of a successful army.
And it becomes, and it stays interesting. It stays engaging, and it stays something that I want to think about and I want to work on. And I mean, we've had the conversations often of, hey, isn't this cool? Well, what would a basing scheme look like? What would a color scheme look like? And sometimes armies don't go beyond that. But with this force, it offered so many different things, including like, because I'm doing a feral knights and it's kind of ambiguous. I can play it as Chaos Knights. I can play it as Imperial Knights and not get a bunch of grief about oh, that's just an Imperial Knight army you're playing as chaos, quote unquote. Like, it looks like just a knight army. So then I'm giving myself flexibility competitively. If when those codexes come out, one's better than the other. If I'm going to an event, I'll play the better codex. If I want a different flavor, I'll play the other codex.
But they look different enough that they could play either or. You could literally go whatever, and it wouldn't feel out of place.
Right. And like, nobody's going to look down. Nobody's going to be like, really? Okay. Like, it'll make sense because it's just this kind of neutral theme. But I'm not going to do like Black Templars. I love Black Templars. I think Black Templars are rad.
We have talked to both about
Yeah.
us going a Black Templar
Yeah.
army, but it stops there. So,
Right.
because everyone has ideas about an army.
Yeah.
And so we've said Black Templar, because you look at the Indomitus, those Blade Guard to me either look like Dark Angels or Black Templar to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sean, you have Dark Angels, so it's perfect.
They're perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're perfect.
But for me, I'm like, and I thought about Black Templars.
Yeah.
But
Hell's
here's
Reach rules.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can't
Yes.
listen to Hell's Reach and
Yes.
not want to play Black Templars.
the thing about it is the reason why it stops is because the first thing is like, oh, that would be a cool army. Okay, that's the spark.
Yep.
Right.
Then usually I'll talk to you. Black Templars would be cool, and because you're such a you're so into the hobby. Like, yeah, that would be super cool. Do it.
That's
And
usually
then-
my
And
response.
then it's like, oh, so then we think, okay, the next step, how might we hobby these things? Oh,
Right.
well, we could do chains, right? Because that's cool, because everyone's got
Yeah.
their swords, chains.
Yep.
These cool things we can do with it. Okay, here's how we might convert some things to be, firstborn into Primaris. I mean, then there's you start to talk about the hobby. How might you paint it? I actually have a pretty good sense of how I might paint it. I have a really good sense of how I might paint it because I've watched enough. I'll go online.
Yeah.
I'll watch videos of like, how do they paint this Templar army? And I'm
Yep.
like, there's a lot of good techniques for Templar painting that might look interesting.
No.
The next stage is, I think, to paint a test model. And in the test model stage is always the tricky part.
Yes.
Because I don't want to paint it and then say, okay, does this look as easy on the videos? It never is.
It never is easy.
Never is. But can I do this in such a way that's efficient to get this army done? Because the best army is a done army, not an army that just sits like the 3 that I have
Right.
that are half completed.
And I think there's an additional step there too, which especially if you play competitively,
Yes.
is how does this army play?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the reason Black Templars stop for me is because I already have an army that does that.
Yeah.
I already have a close combat oriented Space
Yep.
Marine army.
Yep.
I do not need a second.
You don't
Yeah.
need that.
So
Yeah, agreed.
as cool as it would be, it's not going to do anything differently than my Blood Angels do.
Yeah. And
And-
if it just does it differently, but that's not this. It's not. There's no reason to paint up a Black Templar's army. You already have that play is the same,
Right.
But basically,
It's
You're
gonna
even already
feel-
painting black.
yeah.
Right?
Right? Like-
It's like painting Death Company just in different areas.
Adding
Actually,
some
that's,
white.
That's a good
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
So
Same colors. As
yeah, it's the same colors as Death. Literally, they use ropes instead of chains.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I mean, for me, it's. But I think that's also a consideration, especially as resources and time are factors. Is like, well, because I see, you see people that have 3 or 4 different Space Marine chapters because they like what they do.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I agree.
I want more differentiation.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
I want more differentiation in a project.
For sure.
So that was going to be my point, is that I have looked at my Space Marine collection, and there are some models that I know that I'm never really going to be motivated to paint up as Dark Angels.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm like, okay, well, I have these models, and I've never painted them, and I don't think they're ever going to fit into a Dark Angels list, but they would kind of be cool as maybe Imperial Fists.
Yeah.
And I painted some I started an Imperial Fist Heresy army that
Yeah.
got off the ground. I have one of my favorite models I've ever painted. I have that. I have a few basic Marines, and then I never finished any of it. And the reason why is because I was not getting enough of that difference. Like, I don't paint yellow with Dark Angels, so that was cool. Like, painting
Right.
yellow was fun.
Yeah.
and
It's a different color, different hobby experience.
yeah, right. So I found a technique for yellow that I really like, because I'm not really a shade yellow with orange guy. I'm a shade yellow with brown guy. I
Yeah.
really liked that kind of. It was this kind of grungy Imperial Fist look. Really liked it. Different models. Okay, that's cool. But then I realized, like, if I did paint up something for my Imperial Fists that I wanted to play for my Dark Angels, that would look out of place. Whereas
Yeah,
if I paint it up as my chapter and then I decide that I want to play it, oh, well, there we go. I can just
Yeah.
slot it into the list.
Yeah.
And then also that time thing. Do I really want to take all this time? I'm a slow painter already.
Yeah.
Right?
Does it take away from my primary army or
Yeah.
whatever?
And,
Right.
and do I want to spend all this time painting up more Marines? I've
Yeah.
painted Marines.
Yeah.
Right? I painted all the edges and the shoulder pads and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not a new experience.
Yeah.
So when I was gifted a compressor to finally use with the airbrush nozzle that I have, and I started going, what would I want to use this new tool that I have? What's a cool army to do with that? And so then it became Well, I wouldn't want to do Space Marines. So what other armies would be cool and different to play? And this was before the new codex. I landed on maybe I'll do AdMech.
Yeah.
I think AdMech would be a lot of fun. And I have a few AdMech models kicking around. I have a knight kicking around.
Sure.
And that night I won a prize support. And then I was like, oh, I have this knight. I have this Imperial Fist Contemptor. What if I made this crazy fun list where it was like a Mama Knight and then just a bunch of walkers? And so and this was back in 8th Soup. So I bought like a bunch of Imperial Fist Contemptors and some Sentinels. And I was like, I'll have one big knight and a few Contemptors and a bunch of Sentinels and it'll be a crazy list. That's all still in boxes.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
because there wasn't enough motivation there. Like, it was a
Yeah.
fun idea, but I impulse bought it.
Well,
Yeah.
and that I think is something that touches on something that I've gotten away from, and I think something that I think we've all
Tried to get
away from,
Yeah.
which is buying models to rules,
yeah.
yeah.
buying or starting armies to rules. I should say,
because rules are changing so quickly.
They- it's so fast.
Yep.
So you can't. I mean, if you want to start an army, start an army. But I don't have Vanguard veterans with Lightning Claw and Storm Shield for my Blood Angels because I didn't want the models. I know they were a points adjustment away from not being as useful as maybe Death Company or Sanguinary Guard.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're not really themed. They're firstborn. It just wasn't worth the resources to me to invest in a unit to.
Yeah, and you have a hobby. You care about the hobby,
Right, but to even to a further extent is, just because I want to go win games.
Yep.
Buying an army at this point in the rules churn is a very short-lived thing.
Yeah.
And it's only on top for a couple of months.
Yeah.
And then something else comes along, and then it's, this army's, C tier or whatever.
Yeah.
Even if it's still really good.
Yeah, but if you have a collection, you could buy a unit for the rules.
Right.
But buying an army for the rules to play is it's insane to do that.
Hard.
It's
Meta
really,
chasing
really
is
hard.
expensive.
At an army level, it's expensive,
It's-
both time and resources.
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of our listeners do that because
No.
they're more collectors, and that's what I tried to get to with my Blood Angels, which ironic, like I don't even really feel like I'm there. I mean, I'm there, but it's getting to that point where you have that collection, and then you can buy the rules because it is, I'm going to paint a couple land speeders, or I'm going to paint another unit of Sanguinary Guard.
Easy enough. Yeah,
And that's just a normal kind of hobby progression.
yeah.
But
And then the churn becomes fun.
Yeah.
Right.
After you have enough of a collection,
Right.
because then it's like, oh, hey.
I'm adding to this collection.
Well, either you're adding or the churn just made something good again.
Yeah.
And
Right.
when you know it, in my case, I have a few of those painted. And that's really fun to go back to that unit that I
right.
worked on at some point. Like, I can't wait until like X unit is like Land Raiders. When Land Raiders are good again, I hope that it happens at some point before I die.
It would be nice.
It's a 50-50 shot. I would love to bring out my painted Land Raiders again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that will be fun.
But that's the thing about starting it's completely different army.
Yes.
Is you think about it, is if you have played one army for a long time, you have a huge collection.
Yep.
When you start a new army, you're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you have to be motivated to keep going with it. And if you play with any kind of, if you play competitively, then it's tough to get your stuff built, painted, and ready to go. To play. So there's that curve there that you have to have enough motivation to keep going. So I think what you talked about is from a hobby perspective, if it's something different than what you do, that will give you the kind of motivation to keep going. It's a spark.
Yep.
Is it a different army than what you're used to playing? Does it play differently? Does it offer enough of different, but also can you paint it efficiently? Is it something you have a system down? Can you get your system for painting down?
Yep.
And that's I think something that I didn't realize until recently, until I
Yeah.
started really until I maybe before I did the Night Project, we had talked about this Imperial cult, Gene Stealer cult idea that I had is a great idea.
Yeah.
Is taking all the Tyranid iconography off of Gene Stealer cult army and replacing it with Aquila's and like a Gene Stealer cult, Imperial cult army. Great idea.
Yeah.
But like, that's a lot of models.
Yep.
That's a lot of conversion. It's a lot of
That's an incredible amount of time for like a 6 point per model.
incredibly detailed
Yeah.
troops that
Yeah.
are cheap. And so
Yeah.
it's a huge undertaking. And I have a primary army that's super detailed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked about doing all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
I get ideas to do armies all the time. I have a notebook. I write them down and kind of suss them out. And we talk about color schemes and basing and stuff. And and then something else, GW releases something else. And I'm like, ooh,
Yep.
that would be
then
cool.
It wasn't strong enough to keep going. Yeah.
No, but that element of that secondary army for me has to be hyper efficient
Yeah.
to paint. It can't be a labor intensive army because I'm always going to defer to my primary army.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm always going to defer to blood. Last night I was, just kind of in between, and I was hobbying downstairs outside, so I wasn't painting, but I built a couple storm speeders for my recon force.
Yeah.
Blood Angels.
Yeah.
I have knights to build. I gotta go build some.
but those are fun.
Build some Blood Angels.
Yeah. So like Necrons, the Indominus box set, I love. I didn't really like Necrons until they new redesign. Their warriors to me with the plastic rods always look a little derpy.
Yeah.
I loved their wraiths though.
Yeah.
I love the canoptic stuff. And the new Necrons come out and they look really creepy and cool. So I'm like, I will start a Necron army. That's going to be my pandemic army.
Yeah.
So I went out and bought a lot of stuff. I have a Silent King, and you're like, "Hey, is that a Silent King?" I'm like, "Yes, it is."
we can see him
and I have
poking out
I
of the
have a Void Dragon as well. They're super cool.
Yeah.
I went online. I looked at a bunch of videos on how to paint them, and I'm like, "Okay, I have a scheme. I know what I'm going to do." It's a new thing because it was a lot of glazes over metallics, which was something I hadn't done before.
that's
so I'm like,
cool.
"Okay, that's going to be cool." Not knowing that takes a long time. It's especially when you're hand doing it.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, I have this army that's different. It plays a little bit different than what I'm used to. There's no psychics. It's still a shooting army though, but it's a little more of a mixed force. But it's not that different from AdMech, right? That's the problem. It's not different enough from an AdMech army that I already have. But it's cool. So I started to paint it, and then I started to do some test models, and I just ground down because I'm like, this takes too long. I'll never get all this done. So then we started chatting, and you're like, well, here's a better scheme. And I'm like, I like this idea of a white ceramic look with some chipped. And you said, okay, so we talked about it, and that was a better scheme. And you said, it's easier to do. It's great as a second army. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point.
Yep.
So the Necrons are kind of like, unfortunately, AdMech came out. And AdMech are my second army after Eldar. And I'm super excited about them because they play very interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff.
Yep.
But if I ever go back to Necrons, which I hope I will, I'll go back to that scheme that we tried out because it's much quicker, much faster, and boom, there's a third army that I can have done quickly.
And it's still you're still good paint. It's still going to
still
look
looks
good.
It looks good.
You know? And so that's finding that is part of what I really enjoy about the hobby. And it's what we have a lot of conversations where it's okay, this would be a fun project, but I'm not going to stop painting Blood Angels to do this project.
Yep.
So it has to be, how can I do this efficiently?
Yeah.
How can I do this in a reasonable amount of time and get a good effect?
It's kind of like as competitive. You look at efficient units on the table. Their rules are good for their points. Now the hobby, we're looking at what is an efficient way to paint this so that it looks really, really good given the hours spent. So instead of points, you're looking at hours, and then the outcome is the actual look.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
and that's something that's been the focus of my hobby since really mostly since I started doing commissions, especially.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's I need to be efficient as possible.
Yeah.
And so I'm always looking at that. But it's even when it comes to my personal armies, it's sometimes even more pressing because there's so many things I want to do.
Yeah.
And because I can paint efficiently, I can talk myself into projects.
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh yeah, no problem. No problem.
I'll knock that out.
Yeah, no, you kidding me? Just a couple weeks, no problem.
Meanwhile, I'm like, do I really want to spend a year trying to get this army into a playable state?
Right. And if you do, fine. Just know that it's going to be a year.
You have to be very, very upfront when you start a project of how much time it's going to take and how much time you can devote to that.
Right.
And is it going to be your new love?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, is this going to be your new thing? Is this what you are going to pour yourself into? If it's not, take that into consideration. Probably don't start Gene Stealer Cult.
Yeah.
Right?
or Sisters of Battle.
I mean,
right? I started buying
Oh my
Sisters of
gosh.
Battle. You know,
And
because they're
Sisters-
amazing.
they're amazing.
Incredible models.
But I finally got to look at one up close.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh.
So I did a few different schemes.
Uh-huh.
I had a few different, a
So
lot of brainstorming.
You were at the test model brainstorm phase.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, well, I've been brainstorming for a while, and I was like, ooh, this is going to be super fun. These are cool. I love the models. They're, I thought they were different enough from Blood Angels, kind of play style wise. And so I did some test schemes and what's going to work alongside the Blood Angels, what's the basing going to look like, blah, 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 blah. And then got a test model done. It was this very weathered kind of sisters look. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I could bang this out. Like this is not that bad. And I got, started to accumulate a couple models here and there. And I started to paint one Battle Sister squad. And I was like, this is insane. This is absolutely insane. There is no way. Now, Ben has my Sisters of Battle.
Well, I think he's.
I mean, it's just the world turns.
But that's let's get back to like Galen's question: is when do you the first part of it is when do you end a hobby project?
Yeah.
When do you stop? And I think that when you recognize, okay, there are people that paint just for fun to put on a shelf. Those are not the people we're talking to, because then it doesn't matter. You can paint whatever you want. Who cares, right?
The project is whatever you're painting it.
But if your goal to paint is to play with those models, you have to understand and really, am I going to be able to realistically finish and paint this army and field it and play it?
Right.
And if the answer is no, and if you're being honest with yourself, because you must have at some point staring down the barrel of that Battle Sister squad, you're like, I'm not going to paint all these. There's a lot of sisters in the army. There's like probably 30, 40?
Oh, you can get easily up to 60 or 70 infantry
Which is a
without even
good
trying.
list, and it's good.
Yeah. Yep.
You're like, there's no way I'll paint to the standard. I won't get it done.
Oh.
It's not going to happen, right?
No, and I would have to basically stop painting anything else to paint those, which I wasn't willing to do.
Yeah.
Because my Blood Angels project is still ongoing.
Yep.
It's not like I didn't put an end on that project and say, well, I'm good with those for now. Like you're good with your Eldar for now.
Yep.
Pending future releases.
Yep.
You'll see, and then I'm sure you'll go back to it because that's like your first love.
Sure. Yeah.
But they're done. So you can work on your AdMech. That's now your new primary army.
Yeah.
I still have a primary army.
Yeah.
And it's still my Blood Angels.
Yeah.
So anything. So like when I look at the sisters, I'm like, God, this is going to take me forever.
Yeah.
I'm never I could finish this. Sure. It'd take me a year. But like,
what am I going to miss out in the meantime doing this?
Do I want it that badly?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And it's just all the detail and all this. And like, I don't want to spend the time to give these models the attention they deserve and the attention that I would want to give them to have them look a certain way.
Yep.
It's just too much detail.
And that's a pretty horde army, with a lot of detail, which is difficult.
Even the vehicles have a ton of, everything in that army is dripping in detail. Oh my God.
The windows and
the
brass
statues and the flames and the cherubs. And I mean, it's incredible.
It's insane.
A painted Sisters of Battle army is an incredible sight.
Yes.
A painted Gene Stealer cult army is an incredible sight.
Yep.
It's just awesome.
Yep.
But that's their primary army.
They have to be the primary.
And you have to spend the time.
Yeah.
And you have to spend the time. But as like my Knights project.
Knights are absolutely fun to paint.
Yeah.
They're super fun to paint.
Armigers are amazing. Like Armigers are fun. So
I
have this meme list that I'm taking that I pegged an event. I'm going to get this ready by mid-August. And it's fun to play. And I painted it assembled and painted, a few weeks.
Sure.
And I'm going to get it done. I don't need any more Armigers.
Yeah,
I'm done with Armigers.
Yeah.
I like how this list plays. I can just play it.
Yeah.
I have a Knight Lancer that Brian gave me. I just got a Knight Dominus that I traded for Trader A. And a couple other bits. I'm going to make this centerpiece crazy modeling project. And maybe when the codexes come out, I pick up a big Knight or two and add those and convert them up and paint them up. But that project is going to be done when I finish those Armigers.
But it's also, it's different enough in both hobby and play. And it's something that's easy that doesn't take away from whatever your primary. So either when you take on a new army project, it becomes your primary, or it's a secondary thing that you can kind of just work on. So the thing is, though, how it plays kind of matters. And I think Sisters probably is not so different. I mean, it's different.
Not super different.
But I thought of when we were at Utah, I have an idea. Okay, Black Templars is one thing, but I'm like, but Custodes, to me, is like a perfect
That's currently what I'm considering
different army
as my next project.
because Custodes, I have a lot of ideas for how to do really interesting gold in the Custodes, with like shades and some ink washes and stuff. It's a short army. It's a small army, and I could get super deep. I could literally spend enough time on a Custodes that it's worth the while.
Yes.
And that would go quick, real quick.
Yes.
And it wouldn't cost. I always like the idea of being able to have a single box to transport my entire army in. So
always nice.
The thing about it is when I look at Necrons, I look at a lot of warriors. I'm already painting a ton of Scutari. I think Necrons might be.
Yeah.
When do you end a hobby project? I'll tell you what. I played Necrons via TTS, and I just didn't really enjoy the way they played. So I'm going to let it sit for a while. I might try them out in a couple things, just in some test games. But if I can't get that army to play in a different way than what I'm used to, I'm going to have to abandon it because it's not giving me a difference. And I think I got the hobby down. I can figure out how to paint them. But if I can't play them in a way that's appreciably different than the AdMech, which I've already got a bunch going, then I'm going to have to just sell it.
Well, and emotionally, you're way more into your AdMech.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
And so what I'm hearing, the easiest way for me to answer this question in a sentence is go back to the list that we gave of here's why you start a project.
Yeah.
As soon as one of those is broken, has fallen apart, has declined to the point where it is not giving you any juice, it's time to end it.
It's time to end it.
Right. And this dovetails with the last episode where we talk about, looking at your opportunities, looking at your projects and seeing which do I need these, what's going to be released in the future that I might be able to play or paint that isn't this project that I'm struggling with. It's a hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're not having fun with it and you put it on the shelf and it sits there for 3 years.
Yeah.
And then you've seen the next code, like for your Necrons.
Yeah.
Maybe, you'll leave them here. You're not an impulsive guy.
Yeah, I don't need to sell them.
Took you forever to sell your Dark Eldar, but if their next codex comes out and you're still not feeling it,
maybe it's time.
That's a big sign to be like, okay, you've had 2 codexes worth of.
Yeah.
If does this work for me? No.
Yeah. The Thousand Suns are the next codex is coming out.
Yeah.
And I will have a wait and see approach because I can't bring myself to sell Magnus because I painted him.
Sell everything but Magnus.
I might do that. Yeah. And I just freaking love Rubric Marines. I
Yeah.
love the way they look. I love so I'll wait and see what this next codex comes out.
Yep.
But that's a good point. Like you can save it and keep it, but the rules change so often it might come back around how it plays.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see if it ignites some juice.
Yeah.
And that's hard because those are painted, right? Like you've already put you like the model. Like I am never an advocate for selling stuff that you've painted that you like just because it's not good or it's taking up space.
Because you like it. You painted it. It's a nice...
Keep it.
Could I get some decent money on eBay for that Imperial Fist Contemptor that I painted? Oh, hell yeah, I could.
Yeah.
Is it worth it to me? No.
No, just keep it.
It will never see the table again, most likely.
So
when I see it, I'm happy that I painted that model.
I've spent so much time painting Adeptus Titanicus models that we'll probably never see.
Exactly,
but they're fun.
They're just awesome. I have like 2 AOS armies now,
and it's okay to have. And it's kind of like having a painter's army is just kind of a nice little thing.
That's like the next I think thing for me is figuring out which faction from like a painting standpoint I can just max out on.
Just pour yourself
but
into.
I don't worry about playing it.
Never hit the table. So that way you don't have to build a 2,000 point list to build and paint towards.
Yep.
Right.
Because that is a certain amount of pressure as well when you're working
even
on
with
an
the
army.
night list, I built, like Ben handed me this 2,000 point list and I got the 2,000 point list and I'm painting the 2,000 point list so that now I can play with it and I'll add to it. But it's like a fun army. It's not a serious, I'm going to grind on this and find and do all this.
Sure.
That's what the other army's for. But if I could just have like a showcase painting army that I just get a squad, paint it, put it on the shelf, maybe one day, not even worry, like maybe not even buy the codex.
Yeah.
But that's just, that's just me personally.
That's for painter. Yes, for sure. Most of the time though, when you start a project, you have,
you want to play with it.
I usually have about a couple 2,000 point lists, which in general is about 3,000 because you're flexing units a little bit.
Yeah.
But Now, Galen's last question was, when is an army done?
Yes.
Now, from a paint perspective, I think we all agree that we all have a certain level of when the painting is done.
Mm-hmm.
And I never go back and paint and touch up. Never. Ever.
Nope.
Now, I'll paint in stages. So I might base coat something, go to an event, or get it played, play it at league, and then I'll take it back and maybe I'll add the washes to it. Or maybe I'll add, the
like
highlights.
in
But
progress,
that's in progress.
Yeah.
But once it gets to the point where, to me, done is, base coat. Let's see here, base coat. Base coat, wash, edge highlights, like at least one, sometimes two for some of the other stuff. A little OSL or whatever, lenses and stuff like that. Water slide decals for most of it, and then it is sealed. And the base is done.
Yep.
And then you put the little black rim around the base, which is the very
that's
last thing you do.
Yeah.
And it's done. And I
Yeah.
never touch them again.
Yep.
But that's me. There's no reason to me to go back and touch models I've already finished.
I have 2 stages of done.
Yeah.
This is done to the point where my scheme is completed, all the details are done, the highlighting is done, it's probably based, like the base is done. And a lot of my models will reach that point and then sit there. Mm-hmm. And then when I get really ballsy, because I like how they look like that, but then when I'm really feeling my oats, I'm like, okay, time to push myself, I will then weather and freehand and do all of that.
Yeah.
Right? So like my Relic Terminators are at the first stage. They have great bases. They're painted, all the gradients look good. All the details are done. I have not weathered and freehanded them yet.
Yep.
Right? So when I do that and I seal them, never going to go back.
The weather freehand is your final, your stage 2 stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll paint models until they're done, and then I never touch them again. Like I'll do the same. I do airbrush base coats and armor highlights and all that in batches.
Yeah.
So like I have, 10 Death Company assault intercessors that the black airbrushing is done on their armor, and they've sat for months. But that's just painting in progress.
Yeah.
But when I finish units, when I start painting units, I finish units. I don't put units to the side that are partially done.
Yeah.
And so when they're done, they're done. I never go back to them. I also sell. I've sold every army I've ever done.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit of an outlier in that I don't hang on to armies.
Yeah.
And for various reasons. Some were financial.
Yeah.
Some were I just didn't want them anymore. Like my Chaos Army. So, but like there are various stages when my Chaos Army, like my Tzeentch Demon Army was done.
Yeah.
I had like 60 pink horrors. I had some blues.
You even had a display board. Like you
I had a display board. I had every unit except for like the blue scribes or whatever.
Sure.
I had pretty much every unit. I had Fate Weaver. I had the Lord of Change. So I could play multiple different lists. It's about 3,200 points, something, or 3,500 points of Tzeentch Demons.
Yeah.
And that army was done.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started adding Thousand Suns or I started adding Primarchs that it started to grow again.
Yeah.
Or I started playing it competitively, and now I'm adding Plague Bearers, and now I'm adding this. But that army was done because it was fully painted. I had a display board for when I went to events, and I had the options in the codex to play it in multiple different ways.
Yeah.
And that was and I was done painting. Like I would there wasn't anything really that I felt I needed to add to it. So I moved on to other things.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, the turning point. That's the point that my knights will be at when I finish these armigers.
Yep.
The armigers will be done. I have a list that I can play for fun that doesn't suck. And then I can add, the wonderful thing about knights is you can just add a knight and it changes the list and it plays different and they're cool. They're always fun to paint, always.
Yep.
And I can take my time on the bigger nights and really hone in on a theme for that night and tell a story with that individual night.
They can become your showcase pieces. That these other armigers are surrounding with reinforcing the theme and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's more of a modeling project, and it's not the tooling project. And it just...
Well, I mean, technically, an army is done when you have all of the units that sit in that book with all the options. But that's
a pretty extreme definition.
It's an extreme definition.
Yeah.
It's much easier for Tzeentch than it is for Space Marines.
True.
But I think really, if everything... So I have an Eldar army. It's done for now because I refuse to paint old warp spiders. Until Games Workshop releases new plastic Aspect Warriors beyond the Banshees, it's done.
Yeah.
I have room in my heart and my paint desk for new Eldar models. And so when they come out, they're going to hit the desk. I'm going to paint them. But for
Yes.
now, everything else that I want to ever have done is done. So
Yeah.
I don't need any more models. So,
Yeah, and for me, like, I'm a slow enough painter, and then also Space Marines are such a pit of options
Yes.
that you can fall into. I'm never going to call my Angels of Retribution done.
Yes.
Oh no, my Blood
Right.
Angels never be done.
Yeah,
No.
your
never be
primary army, it's likely that you will never reach a point where you go, this is done forever.
Especially a supported army
Right.
like
Right.
Marines.
Yeah,
Because there's
absolutely.
always going to be new ones.
Yes.
But
always.
you can put limiters on
Exactly.
a project
Yes.
to get it to done for now.
Yes.
Which is actually a place I'm trying to get to with my Blood Angels.
Me too.
Because I won't do non-specialist firstborn.
Yeah.
That's like my kind of soft rule.
You're not going to do a tactical squad.
Yep.
I'm not going to do tactical squads. I'm not going to do Vanguard vets. I'm not going to do regular bikes or attack bikes or, I don't care how good they are competitively.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get those models because they're clearly on their way out.
Yeah.
And
So
I'm
that's-
building a modern force.
That's your limiter.
So that's
that. Yeah.
But it's not much of a limiter. They do a Primaris release every year.
Yeah.
So
You
it's
still have
like,
plenty of options.
so I still have Indominus units, so
Well, I mean, worse. It could be worse. You could be painting Vanguard vets, or which aren't bad, or Devastator squads, or those things. But you have put a limiter because you don't want to go back and paint and build and paint.
it's
those.
the only way that I would ever kind of get to a place where I can say, okay, I have what I need for that. I'm going to work on X, Y. I want to do Cruel Boys for Age of Sigmar. I want to do this over here. There are a lot of other projects. And if I'm like, well, I need a Razorback, then it's going to be like, the Space Marine just never ends. It's a never ending pit of despair. So
Well, Chaos is the same for sure.
Yeah. And for me, like, right now I have been looking ahead at, like, I'd kind of like to put a pause on my Angels of Retribution work for a while. What do I need to do to the point where I will still be able to write lists, play competitively without needing to invest a lot more painting? And so for me, my list right now is like, I need to paint up some Blade Guard because I'd like to try them as a tool.
Yeah.
And I want to paint now with my attack bikes pretty much done. I need to go back and weather them. And
You need to do stage 2 of your
I need to
painting.
do
Right.
stage 2, but I
Right.
got a lot of stuff at stage 1, which looks good. I need to do some like Black Knights and a little bit more Ravenwing stuff. And then I'll be at the point where my army feels fleshed out to the point that everything that I would want to use in a list is done. I have a lot of different options, and I can now move on to something. I will likely go back. I have a start collecting Vanguard box, all the Phobos units and stuff like that. I'd like to paint them at some point, right? And they're a good option. They'll add to my tournament options, but right now I don't need them.
Yeah.
I don't need them to feel complete for the moment.
You might be ready for that second army once you put a bow on kind of what you want
Yeah.
now from your primary. Then it's probably time to do a second.
Honestly, the Black Knights and Samael, as soon as I have them done, plus the other 5 Relic Terminators, I might call it done for a while.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
and especially like your Codex plays is so on the theme.
Yes.
And so that you're able to tweak your list within just those Dark Angel specific units.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even that you get a lot of different play styles, and we'll get there. I'm getting almost to the point with the Blood Angels where, like, once I kind of catch up with Indomitus, I'm pretty much done with the Primaris stuff that I want.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, oh well, I want more Sanguinary Guard. Or I want more Death Company. Or I want more Dreadnoughts. Or I want a Assault Terminator squad that I'm doing that as a modeling thing.
Sure.
So those are like more modeling projects. Like the individual knights are more modeling projects. It's not keeping up with the Joneses kind of, I want these tools because they're going to show up in a competitive list.
Yeah.
But then I know, by the time I catch up with Indomitus, I'm racing against GW's Primaris release schedule,
Which is
every
surprising.
18 months.
There's been a nice pause since
been a
the
great
Indominus
pause.
box.
Great pause.
But you
Necessary.
just know
It's coming back.
There's coming.
There'll be one next year.
Yeah.
At some point.
I'm sure there will
There'll
be.
be another run,
Yeah.
and which will be awesome. I love Primaris Marines. I love painting Primaris Marines. I love collecting them. So I'm excited for that, but I want to be at a point where I'm just working on those additional kind of luxury units.
Sure.
And then when that wave hits, I'll be able to be like, okay, I want 2 of everything.
Yeah. So like the AdMech right now, I have a pretty... I'm trying to finish Qatari and some infiltrators, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to. I know AdMech as we record this is it's the top army in the game. I mean, there's no doubt that in Dark Eldar there's arguments to be made, what have you. But I had a lot of Qatari that I needed to paint. I'm going to be finishing this up for this event. But then I'll have a pretty good base to work from. So what I'll have left are things that really aren't that amazing right now, that are more luxury units, like the Electro Priests. They're not super amazing, or Dune Riders, or Taraxi. So I'll have...
Ooh, those are cool.
They're cool. They're more like they're not the things that need to make it into a list.
Yeah.
They're more those luxury painted lists.
Right.
So rather than paint that, I might switch to Custodes. I might try a little 6-month excursion, or I might try Necrons. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
But I think that it's in the air exactly where I want to go next. But to me, Custodes ticks all the boxes of everything we talked about. Is why you would start a project, how you can see it through, and how you could quickly put some limiters on it and end it. And I would basically do just that. And I'm working on that. We'll see. We'll see if that works out.
Yeah, I think especially with 9th, and I don't think the trend is going to change, is with the 3-year kind of redo every army, do a new edition kind of cycle. I think the best time to do that army is a couple months after their codex comes out, when you figure if you're going to be playing competitively. Wait a couple
for the
months.
dust to settle.
Don't jump on the meme list that is
wait
the
for
top.
Yeah.
There's a lot of racks out there with liquefiers that are not getting used.
I mean, so you want it to kind of settle.
Yeah.
Because then that really is going to be their rule set for a few years.
For a while.
And there's going to be a thing that there might be a campaign book or something that comes along, or an Army of Renown or something that comes along. And so that's going to be what the tools that you're going to have available. And you can build a list in that time and play a list. And if you're not worried about being on the top edge competitively, then you give yourself a lot of freedom to just play an army, and it might not be great.
Yeah.
But you could have fun painting it. You can have fun building it. It'll be a different play experience. It'll be a different challenge.
And the nice thing about it now is the rules come around. So a lot of stuff that may not be amazing will usually tend to get changed.
Yeah, there you go.
And they tend to change. What's funny is GW seems to tend to kind of switch what's good in an army.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you really liked Ludas and all these shooting units in the last version of Orcs, but you didn't buy any vehicles, guess what? You're buying vehicles now, because vehicles are good and they're fun and they're interesting. And so I think that when those codexes do come around, when the Knight codexes come out, there's going to be some kind of combo close combat Knight or something that I'm going to be ooh, I want to play that.
Yeah.
And so I'll get that. I'll add it and I'll play it. But, I have a stable list that I can play now. Yeah. And it is what it is. I don't need to tweak it.
Definitely, though, I think what you said, though, wait for the FAQ. Not that, there's always especially some of these things that come out hot. Do not try, because by the time you build, paint, and get that on the table, that time will pass you by.
Yep.
So getting involved in the hype of what's good, especially, it's one thing if you are a competitive player and you have access to all this stuff and can borrow hammer and do all this other nonsense.
Right.
That's one thing. If you can borrow hammer your way to fine, you want to play an event, that's great. But if it's an army that's a collection that you want to keep, you'd have a little more. There's a moral ownership of it versus just I want to slap together something to play in an event.
Right, and it's a completely different motivation.
Yeah. In which case, you don't need to chase the meta list.
But even but you can chase the meta army. Sure. You don't have to play the meta list. I mean, if you're gonna if I were to start Dark Eldar now, I would have Drazhar and Incubi.
Yeah, because
they're awesome.
Well, they're also new models and
they're new models and they look awesome.
Yeah.
So if I were going to start Eldar, I would have Janezar and Banshees because they're plastic aspect warriors and I want them.
Yeah.
I'd have the new bikes. So they're I would approach it from that, but I would maybe wait on buying Wraith models.
Yeah,
just Wraithguard. Just maybe wait and see how they are.
Just wait. We'll see.
But so you have to look at your motivation for starting a project.
Yeah.
And when if you're struggling with a project, maybe ask, well, are some of those reasons not being fulfilled? Like you said,
Yeah.
Sean, are some of those reasons not being fulfilled anymore? Have I overthought my paint job?
Yeah.
Have I overshot with what I want to accomplish? If you want to learn non-metallic metal, maybe do Custodes instead of Necrons.
Yeah.
Maybe just take a look at the
for
project and see, well, what's feasible, what's realistic for where I'm at, and am I just doing something just to do it? Am I doing because I would just want to play it?
Yeah. I think
Or am I doing something to paint? Is this going to continue to be interesting, or am I going to paint 3 models and be like, okay, I did that.
I think what you said that's well said. It's like, what is your original motivation? And if you paint 3 models and you get a little bit like, think about it.
Yeah.
Wait a little bit, but don't be afraid to sell stuff.
And
just
be
move
like,
on.
I would
and
also
cut your
say
losses.
you don't need to buy the whole army at once.
Do not buy the whole army at
because
once.
Yeah, that's a great.
Buy a box.
Buy
Yeah.
a box.
Paint a box, because the sunk cost of a box to get to the 3rd model and go, I don't know, this just doesn't do it. Compared to, I picked up the whole 2,000 point list. Now I have to build all of it. Now I have to paint all of it.
For sure.
It's so much more of a mountain to climb. And then you're going to be trying to force yourself through it because you're like, I invested all of this.
And that's just sending good money after bad. I mean,
Yeah,
because you're never
exactly.
going to get that time back.
No.
And you're going to like hate paint this army.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's not going to look as good because you're not going to enjoy painting it.
Nope.
And,
Yep. For sure.
don't play an army you resent.
Yes. Yes. Never play an army resent. Good. That's a good way to end this. All right. That was a listener question from Galen, which became a whole second segment, which was good.
did.
All right. So that is it for our show. Now, that was our listener mail from Galen, although he's a Discord user. But if you have a question, comment, or suggestion you'd like us to read and answer on the podcast, please message us on our Facebook page or email us at thebattlehost@gmail.com. So that's all for this episode. If you'd like to support us, you can help us in a few different ways. You can tell your friends about us. You can like us on Facebook. You can subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, which does help to boost our listening audience. We have a YouTube channel. We post all our podcasts, so please subscribe, like, and comment on our videos. And finally, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thebattlehost. Thanks for listening to Battle Hosts.
Remember to be a better gamer.
And build a better community.
Good night.
And if they say like if you quit before 40, that your lungs can get back to like full health.
No, that's cool.
That's good.
So
No, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
the crack might not have helped, but